This guy weighs only 2 tons, and this is her face, after undergoing facial harmonization. No, this is a lie. This was after taking a punch from the new transfer student. Yes, he just got transferred to the school, and he farms aura just by existing. The school's girls, they want to have him at all costs. The school's alpha male, everyone wants to mate with the strongest male. It's the same in nature, and I'll warn you now that this story is different. Here you won't see a boy who gets bullied and then becomes strong or anything like that. Here whoever bullies is the one who's going to get bullied. God may forgive, but our protagonist forgives no one. It all starts with the hot girl filming in the classroom. Suddenly, a rumor arrives, saying that the second year's bully got beaten up in the cafeteria by the new student. The gossipy neighbor of the moment is Summon High School's number 2. Number 1 says that's impressive for a newbie, while the hot girl starts asking number 1 to look at the camera. And all this is because YouTube just got launched, meaning from now on the school beatdowns are going to be filmed for everyone to see. While they were thinking about what they would do with the new student who got transferred, one of the henchmen was squeezing a nerd and asking him for 300,000 kwanzas. He probably wanted to buy a can of soda, until suddenly number 1 decides they should capture the new student so he doesn't interfere with the hierarchy. But little did he know the wolf had just knocked on his door, literally. Even the henchman who was bullying stopped to look. The boy who walked in asks if the boss of this school is in this room. At least that's what he heard. The girls in the room immediately blush and go crazy wanting to bungee jump without a rope. So the new student asks if he's the boss of the school, but the fat guy takes a while to answer. And in the next instant, he's already earned his facial demonization. Fell to the floor like a sack of manure. The boy who was being grinded down seconds ago didn't understand anything. The girl with the giant melons fell in love that instant. Rank 2 immediately stood up cursing and asking who the boy is. He soon turned redder than a bell pepper because he wouldn't stop talking, asking who he was and what he wanted. But the boy just answers that he was transferred to this school today. This makes the bell pepper even crazier, asking if he's messing with him, and soon throws a punch at the new student. But he grabs the guy's hand with so much force that it crushes Rank 2's fingers. The transferred student asks if he's the boss of the school, but screaming in pain, he says it's not him, and even points at Rank 1, saying that scoundrel over there is number 1, hit him, not me. Oh no. Then I don't know if the protagonist saw a fly on Rank 2's cheek, which he immediately slapped away. That one went to sleep without any dreams. The line of nerds who get beaten up every day had no reaction left after seeing all this. So the new student goes up to Rank 1 and asks if he's the boss. The guy just makes an ugly face and was about to ask if he'd lost his mind, but then the punch was so strong his nose caved in, his phone went flying and he almost fell off his chair. Only this made him furious, so he tried to fight back with everything. But the new student dodged with ease, and there another fly was about to die. The punch was so strong you could hear it from here at home. This already destabilized the guy, but he came with another one, and again drove his nose in, then jumped to finish the combo, landing a kick to the poor guy's neck, who crashed into the window. He only didn't fall from the second floor because there was an iron bar on the window. The nerds were still standing there in disbelief. The school's Rank 1 was on his knees and completely knocked out. I don't feel so good. He says that if he hadn't come after these guys, they would have come after him. So he decided to settle everything now and leave, saying that if they still hold a grudge, they should come find him and still close the door to finish farming his aura plus ego. The student who had recently been getting beaten up can't believe what he just saw. The girl who was filming everything is blushing and says he's so fucking handsome. It's already clear that this girl right there, our protagonist, is gonna smash. Later, Donggu talks with Kim Doyle and asks if he'll deal with the bullies one by one and what it would cost. Doyle just stares at him, leaving Donggu confused. Then he explains he hasn't been back in Korea long, so he doesn't fully get what Donggu means. Still, if Donggu wants his help, he'll need to pay for it. Donggu is shocked. He says people usually help because it's the right thing to do, even quoting, "With great power comes great responsibility." He insists that since Doyle is strong, protecting the weak is his job. Doyle brushes that off as nonsense and asks a simple question. Will he pay or not? If not, he's leaving. Donggu quickly stops him and begs him to listen. He reminds Doyle that he saw what happened yesterday and says weak students like them really need his help. His voice turns emotional as he says many of his friends suffer every day. No one steps in to help them, and telling the teachers does nothing. All it gets them is more beatings because adult solutions don't work on these bullies. Donggu says their lives feel like stumbling through total darkness every day. But what Doyle did yesterday felt like a beam of light shining into that darkness. He puts a hand to his chest and begs again, saying Doyle has the power to save them. Doyle shuts down the emotional speech and tells him to back off. Donggu is frustrated, but Doyle says he does understand. He just badly needs money himself because of his own problems. That word hits Donggu hard. Memories of bullies taking his money and mocking him come rushing back, and he bursts out, asking why everything always comes down to money. He can't understand why another student would need it that badly. Doyle stays calm and asks if he's ever heard of assassins. The question catches Donggu completely off guard. Doyle explains that his father leads Blackhead, the biggest assassin group in the world, and that he was born into that life. Donggu can barely believe it and repeats the name in shock. Doyle goes on, saying his parents split up some time ago. A girl listening nearby is surprised by that. He says his father always made his mother cry, so she brought him and his little brother to Korea with no real plan. That made his father furious, and he froze all their bank accounts, so that's why Doyle needs money. After saying that, he adds that he has a job interview at Burger King and starts to leave. Dongaki stands there stunned, trying to make sense of it all. The story sounds crazy, but Doyle said it so seriously that it feels true. Then Donggu makes up his mind and calls after him, offering 50,000 won for every person he beats. Doyle stops. Donggu holds up 5 fingers and nervously wonders if he should have offered more. Doyle turns back and answers with one word, deal. The girl is thrilled, once again thinking how handsome Doyle is. Somewhere else, another group of bullies talks about how one transfer student took down Park Kang-wake. Their leader, Park Ju-heim, captain of Suman's judo club, wonders if the new kid really beat 3 people by himself. His right-hand man, Park Ju-dong, worries this could cut off their money stream. Back with Doyle and Donggu, Donggu points at the group and warns they might get noticed. Doyle says he came to fight, so he doesn't care. Donggu warns him these guys are far more dangerous than Kang-wook, who was only a fake leader. Now the truth comes out. The real rulers of the school are the Judo Twins, Park Ju-hyung and Park Ju-dong. They want to become national athletes, so to protect their records, they stay hidden behind Kang-wook and use him to squeeze money out of other students. Donggu calls them vampire trash. Doyle simply asks if he should fight them too, and after a pause, Donggu says yes. Doyle takes the new job. At the same time, one of the twins notices a girl named Sol Minna filming. He tells her to show him what she's watching. When Park Jo-hyung sees Sol Minna recording them, he demands to see it. She refuses and says he'll have to keep his promise and stop smoking first. Ju-hyung blows up, asking how she dares talk to him like that, then adds with a sneer that he'll let it slide because she's pretty. A scream cuts him off. It's Park Ju-dong. Kim Doyle has just kicked Ju-hyung hard in the head. Sol Minna and her friend are shocked to see Doyle there. Doyle Dong collapses unconscious from the force. Doyle Hyung angrily demands to know who attacked him and why. Then weirdly he yells at Doyle for daring to be that handsome. Doyle Hyung stares in confusion, thrown off by how calm Doyle looks right before a fight. Doyle Hyung got mad when Doyle wouldn't even look at them. He turned, thinking maybe Doyle had called backup, then froze, confused by whatever Doyle was staring at. Doyle suddenly yelled, fake, and drove a clean punch into his face. The hit was unbelievably strong, sending him flying across the area. Right then, a caption popped up saying this was the story of how Doyle became the strongest man in the world. Standing over the beaten twin like he was claiming the place, Doyle slammed another hard strike onto the top of his head. Minja felt lightheaded from how much she admired him, unable to understand how one person could be this good-looking and this cool at the same time. Just then, Doyle got a phone alert saying 50,000 won had been sent for his mission. Thanks to flyers Donggu passed around, word of Doyle's win spread through the whole school fast. The flyers, called Young Kim Doyle punishes the Judo Twins, blew up around campus, and a crowd of girls gushed over his looks and strength. That set off Minnie, who started yelling, asking which girl dared stare at her husband's picture. Wrapped in her own strange pink mood, she pushed through the classroom while the other girls stayed obsessed with Doyle. Furious, Minna wondered if everyone had gone crazy, then shouted, "Everybody stop!" Still boiling over, she ordered them to take the flyer down right now, throwing insults in the heat of the moment. She ripped the flyers from their hands and warned that if she caught them looking at her husband's photo again, they were dead. Then she rounded on another student and harshly demanded to know if she had one too. The girl nervously said she didn't have it at all. Minna kept ranting that these girls deserved to die for looking at another woman's husband. Her phone cut her off. A string of texts from Jang Hyunwoo told her to answer his call and threatened to beat up everyone at Suman High School. She stared at the screen, then quietly clenched the Doyle flyer hidden behind her back. Donggu briefed Doyle on the next job. This time, the target was Jang Hyunwoo from Changkyul High. He said Hyunwoo was a major name known as the King of South Seoul, a follower of B.A. Shichol, and an executive in the 12 Nations, which made him a seriously dangerous enemy. Donggu told Doyle to focus only on Hyunwoo today and never look down on him. Then he went over Hyunwoo's skills, 3-time amateur boxing champion with a body and instincts way beyond a normal fighter. According to Donggu, even the Judo Twins Doyle beat before wouldn't last against him together. Doyle cut in coldly, saying he beat them anyway. Donggu pushed back, warning him to take this seriously because Hyunwoo's worst trait was his cruelty. Once Hyunwoo picks a target, he chases them down and tortures them so badly death can start to sound better. Donggu added that when Hyunwoo truly snaps, nobody can predict what he'll do, so he planned to watch from far away and call the police if things got bad. But when Donggu turned back to keep talking, Doyle was already gone. Somewhere else, Jang Hyunwoo was cornering Minnie-lo and her friend. He angrily blamed Min-hai, saying if she had picked up his call, her friends wouldn't have been hurt. Min-hai coldly answered that they weren't her friends. That stunned Park Kang-wook, who asked if they hadn't been close. She said that only lasted while he ruled Sumin, and now that the transfer student took his spot, there was nothing left to say. Park Kang-wook could only call her cruel. Hai Wen-well laughed and said that was exactly why he couldn't let go of his Princess Min. His words caught Min-hai off guard. Then Hyunwoo started begging her to date him just 3 times. When she ignored him, he moved closer, promising he'd show her a good time. But before he could finish, a bottle came flying at him from far away, so sudden it almost looked like it appeared out of nowhere. Hyunwoo barely dodged it in time. Doyle stepped in and said it was too bad he couldn't end it with one throw. Manhwa stunned by how suddenly he showed up. Hyunwoo got to his feet and demanded to know who Doyle was. Doyle answered that he was the guy who was about to beat him up. Manhwa lit up inside, wondering if he had come to save her. Doyle noticed Manhwa lit up kept showing up wherever he went, and started thinking it couldn't just be luck. The way she looked at him felt strange, and he wondered if she was watching him on purpose. He warned her that if she tried anything, he'd kill her. Manhwa lit up took that hard stare as interest instead, and secretly wished he really would kill her. At that moment, Hyunwoo jumped up and yelled at Doyle for butting in. Then Jang Hyunwoo blew up, demanding how Doyle dared touch Manhwa. He rushed in at top speed with his trademark move, a sudden straight punch while charging, something Park Kang-wook recognized right away. Dong-gu was shocked by how fast Hyunwoo moved and shouted, "That's dangerous, Kim Doyle." But just before the punch landed, Hyunwoo stopped and felt some weird liquid hit his face. Disgusted, he wondered if Doyle had used some kind of chemical. That split second was enough for Doyle to drive a heavy kick into him. Calmly, Doyle explained that when people rush him, it startles him, and when he gets really startled, he might spit without meaning to. Hyunwoo flared up from the pain and humiliation, realizing Doyle had actually spat on him, and demanded to know if he was being mocked. Doyle didn't let him recover and smashed him with a nearby chair, called that a fake attack, then followed with an uppercut. Hyunwoo got even madder and called Doyle insane, screaming that he would kill him. He came in throwing savage punches, but Doyle slipped around everyone. Park Kang-wook watched in panic. Sure, Doyle couldn't beat a real boxer like Hyunwoo, but in the middle of that assault, Doyle landed a crushing hit to Hyunwoo's side. Do Young-chol suddenly asked, "What?" shocking Park Kang-wook, who thought he'd only been talking to himself. Hyunwoo clutched his right ribs in pain. Doyle calmly said those weren't broken yet and that the ones he would break were on the other side. Then he drove in a brutal punch that crushed Hyunwoo's left ribs, making him scream. While Hyunwoo struggled for air, Doyle stood over him as his stunned friends looked on. Hyunwoo coughed and fought to breathe. Doyle started giving the speech he was supposed to memorize, calling Hyunwoo a bully and warning him not to hurt anyone again, but then stopped and admitted he forgot the rest, which made Dong-gu yell that he told him to memorize it. So Doyle made up the ending himself, telling Hyunwoo to stay quiet and stop causing trouble. Then he gave a chilling warning: if Hyunwoo ever stood in front of him again, he'd drag in everyone he loved, tear them apart, and kill him after. Meanwhile, Manhwa watched with tears in her eyes, thinking, "Please don't fight for me." She leaned against the wall, overwhelmed with admiration, and bitterly commented on this cruel, competitive world. The next day, in a gym, Im Young-byum got a shocking phone call. He heard Jang Hyunwoo had been beaten by students from Suman High and was now in the hospital. Young-byum scoffed, saying the Suman kids must have jumped him like cowards and started a rebellion. He decided he'd handle it himself and vowed to crush those worms. Not long after, Young-byum showed up at Suman and had all the students gathered, then asked if everyone was there. Park Kang-wook nervously said yes. As he looked at Young-byum, Kang-wook thought it was strange that someone only a year older could feel so different, like his fighting skill alone had built his name across East Asia. Young-byum noticed the crowd was still missing people and asked where the rest were. Park Kang-wook explained that Park Sung-yoon and the second years were in the hospital because of the pork incident. Young-byum brushed that off and asked about the Judo Twins. The student hesitated, then quietly said they were in the hospital too because their testicles had burst. Young-byum stared, unable to believe it, and asked Park Sung-yoon if this was some kind of joke. But when he saw the student's fear, he snapped and punched him in the chest, then yanked his hair and threatened to beat some sense into him. Park Kang-wook shouted that he wished it were a joke, but everything he said was the awful truth. Young-byum started slapping Park Kang-wook and sneered, asking if he was enjoying all this. At last, Park Kang-wook gave him the name behind everything, the transfer student. He said Doyle was the one who took down Park Sung-yoon, the Judo Twins, and even Jang Hyunwoo. In fear, he told Young-byum that this transfer student caused it all. That immediately caught Young-byum's interest, and he asked where the boy was now. Meanwhile, during student activities in a classroom, Mina-e looked at her phone where she had a picture of Doyle beating the twins. She was happy that her own carelessness had somehow led her to meet him. She kept scrolling through videos, admiring how handsome he was. Then she opened a clip of Doyle eating while scolding her for being reckless, asking who she'd been with and threatening to kill her somewhere private. Mina twisted that into a romantic invite and felt thrilled. At the same time, the teacher announced sign-ups for the film club. When the teacher asked who wanted in, Mina snapped out of her daydream and shot her hand up right away, with her friend doing the same. The teacher was stunned by how popular the club suddenly became. Mina was just as shocked by how eager everyone was to join. She couldn't believe these students, who only cared about studying, were trying to get into the school's biggest club. Then her thoughts drifted off and she imagined Doyle taking her to the movies. Inside, Mina was screaming that Doyle was hers and everyone else needed to stay away. The room turned chaotic as students fought for a spot, and Mina's jealousy only made it worse. Away from all that, Doyle sat quietly and tried to learn more about Solmena, the girl who kept showing up around him. He asked Dong Gui, who gave him the basics. That only made Doyle more suspicious. He wondered if his father had sent her to watch him, since he'd never seen her in the blackhead group before. Dong-gui then asked what club Doyle picked, and nearly lost it when he heard it was the anime club. To him, that place was holy ground for otaku. So Dong Black blew up, saying a good-looking popular guy like Doyle had no business invading his last safe space. Just then, Quan arrived with his group, and Bang pointed Doyle out as the one who beat the Judo Twins. He shut him up, not wanting it to look like he'd come over something petty. He then asked if Doyle was also the one who beat Jang Hyun-wook. Bang called Doyle a pork-crazy psycho, and the protagonist snapped at him for trashing a food he liked too. As MC and his crew moved in, Donggu was still whining about Doyle joining the anime club, saying he couldn't accept him when he hadn't even seen the biggest series. Then Doyle suddenly got up and ran. Donggu panicked, thinking he'd upset him, and hurried to say he'd let him into the club. But Doyle wasn't leaving. He was running straight at Quan and his group. Bang and he were both stunned that Doyle came at them on his own. Bang guessed Doyle was trying to take control early, but he quickly decided that trick wouldn't work on Iljeong. The protagonist admitted Doyle was strong and said there was no point talking between men before raising his guard. He fired a heavy punch at Doyle, but Doyle slipped past it with shocking speed. Instead of stopping, Doyle kept charging and ran right by Quan. MC chased after him at once. He looked totally confused, unable to figure out what Doyle was doing. At the same time, Solmina was sure Doyle had joined the elite film club. There was no way someone like him would pick the anime club. Then Doyle suddenly showed up in front of her, making her yelp. The surprise hit so hard she screamed again. Doyle directly demanded to know who she was and why she kept following him. Then he asked if his father had sent her to spy on him. Mina got the wrong idea completely and somehow took it as talk about starting a family together. Meanwhile, Quan was furious that Doyle had ignored his attack and bolted. Doyle coldly told Mina to tell his father he would never go back. Right then he came charging in, calling Doyle a worm. The protagonist swung a kick straight for his head. Dong-gok shouted Doyle's name, trying to warn him. Doyle grabbed Mina and spun with her low to the ground, dodging the kick in one smooth move. Mina looked weirdly pleased to be caught up in all of this. Quan yelled at Doyle to stop dodging and just die. After saying what he wanted to Mina, Doyle turned back to MC, who warned that his chance to run was gone. He kept mocking him, calling his words nonsense, and treating him like a bug. Then he launched a flurry of punches at Doyle, but Doyle handled them with ease, blocking or slipping past every hit. Doyle was about to hit back when Won, the head of student affairs at Suman High, stepped in and stopped the fight. He barked at them, asking why students from another school were gathered here. Quan clicked his tongue, irritated by the interruption. To him, adults always showed up at the worst time and ruined everything. He told Doyle this wasn't over and promised they'd meet again after school. Then he started to leave with his group. But as Quan walked away, Doyle rushed in from behind and smashed an elbow into the back of his head. Everyone froze. No one expected Doyle to attack right in front of student affairs. Doyle glared at him and called him a curse that ruins everything. The protagonist stood there in shock, unable to believe Doyle had actually hit him in front of everyone. The whole place was stunned, especially Bang, who watched in horror. Dong realized Doyle had gone way too far by blindsiding the leader of another school. He knew hurting an Iljeong student meant the transfer student was basically doomed. Terrified, he wondered what would happen now that Doyle had gone after the leader before even dealing with the rest. Elsewhere, the fallout was already building as someone sat tied to a chair. A huge tattooed man and a woman tortured him with hot water, mocking him as he screamed in pain. The big man cursed out his crew, angry that they betrayed him after all he'd done for them. Then he walked up to the tied-up girl with a lit cigarette and reminded him what he'd promised. If he ever got caught, that he'd rip his eyes out. Right then, his phone rang and he got annoyed at being interrupted. He picked up the phone and heard that Quan had been beaten at Suman High. The caller was Ham, Iljeong High's number 2. Elsewhere, Dong-gu explained to Doyle what the 12 national delinquents were, a group of 12 powerful troublemakers from across the country. Doyle brushed it off as kid stuff and wondered why everyone was making such a big deal when he was already annoyed about cleaning bathrooms. Dong-gu kept scolding him, saying it was crazy that a transfer student had already earned a full week of cleaning the second-floor bathroom. Doyle just told him to get lost. That made Dong-gu snap. He warned Doyle that he had no idea how serious this was. He'd messed with the 12 national delinquents, and now the first police squad was coming for them. Worse than the squad itself was someone named Jin Sung-al, Tralibe. Dong-gu said this was never supposed to happen, and the first squad would definitely come back swinging. Doyle mocked that, asking how they were supposed to be scary when they hadn't even cut anyone apart. Then he reminded Dong-gu this all started because of the job Dong-gu gave him, and now it was just a pain. Doyle said he was done with all of it and would rather work a part-time job. Dong-gu tried to change his mind, saying the pay was better than anywhere else, and even came with severance. Doyle told him again to leave. Dong-gu was stunned that Doyle talked to him like that after all his worrying. In the end, he walked off frustrated. As he went down the street, an older guy stopped him, smacked his head and scolded him for not saying hello. When Dong-gu glared back, the man mocked him and threatened to kill him. But in his head, he knew that if anyone pushed too far, Doyle would come deal with it. So he instantly switched tones, laughed it off and said he was only joking with a friend. Dong-gu kept walking, thinking about the last few peaceful days. The students had actually been enjoying themselves, even planning to hit the snack shop together for the first time in forever. They talked about chairs without pins and wearing gym clothes without fear. but Dong-gu knew that calm was over, and reality was back. Then someone suddenly threw an arm over his shoulder and asked if he knew the guy seen at the gate earlier. Dong-gu stiffened in fear while the man beside him smiled like it was all a joke. Kwon was still mad, his neck aching as he kept thinking about where Doyle had gone, and that only made him angrier. Later they had Dong-gu on the ground, surrounded and terrified, and he swore he really didn't know where Doyle was. They didn't buy it, and MC kicked him so hard his glasses flew off. Then he threatened to crack his skull and ordered him to call Doyle right now. Holding his bloody nose, Dong-gu pulled out his shaking phone, but instead of calling Doyle, he tried dialing 112. They caught on right away and started stomping and beating him, laughing that the police wouldn't help him. The beating kept going as they mocked him for being a fake, useless cop. Somewhere else, Doyle was at a burger place for a job interview. The owner saw he had no part-time experience and looked over his bizarre resume. His listed skill was hand-to-hand combat, his hobby was weapon care, and Doyle even added that he was good at throwing certificates. The owner stared at the resume and asked why anyone would list throwing certificates as a skill. Under his breath, he figured Doyle had to be nuts, even if he looked decent. He told Doyle the resume was wild, but this was a burger place. They didn't need someone whose talent was throwing papers. Right then, two big guys walked in. The owner recognized them as regular troublemakers. With a sigh, he turned Doyle down, saying this job wasn't for him, though he offered a free burger later. One of the men immediately started yelling that the burgers gave him terrible stomach pain. He flashed a phone photo and claimed there was a cockroach in his lettuce. A nearby customer got nervous about their own meal, but the owner calmly said the black bit in the photo was just an olive. The big guy kept making a scene, and the owner asked why he always pulled this. The man joked that every time he ate there, he lost so much weight it was like going on a diet. Tired of it, the owner agreed to talk in the back and settle it. Then he called for an employee, Solji, and told her to take 300,000 won from the register, while he led the man away. The guy shouted that this was assault, and threatened to report the owner for laying hands on a minor. Doyle deliberately brushed shoulders with him and acted startled, like he had no idea what was going on. Elsewhere, the guys who beat Dong-gu decided Doyle and Dong-gu couldn't be close. Dong-gu didn't even have his number. Dong-bum was furious. Doyle had slipped away somehow, even though he had been watching the main gate. After spotting Dong-gai beaten badly on the ground, they chose to walk off and leave him there unconscious. Somewhere else, I'm Zhongchan Il-geun. Hai's number 2 asked if the collection team had been trained right. Choi Hye-chung, ranked 5th, said the collection amount would go up to 50 starting today. He also said he told them to bring enough food for the boys, and Im Zhongchan agreed that made sense. Im Zhongchan suggested they check the area once before heading back, but he and Doyle passed each other without either one noticing. When they went into the burger place, they found the two troublemakers on the floor bleeding and out cold. Smirking, Zhongchan wondered who was bold enough to do that. Inside, the workers and customers were stunned, trying to figure out what happened and how someone tossed those two around so easily, like throwing French fries. From what everyone was saying, Zhongchan figured the attacker wasn't restaurant staff, and he wondered if it was someone from the Seokdong crew. After a brief pause, Zhongchan ordered his men to grab the student who had just left in a Suman High uniform. Then he barked at them to move now. Meanwhile, Doyle walked outside, thinking about this month's living costs when Dong-gu suddenly showed up in front of him. He was out of breath, his face covered in bruises. Hesitantly, Dong-gu said he heard there was a part-time interview today, so he came just in case. Even looking like that, Dong-gu smiled, relieved Doyle was okay. Doyle gave him a hard look and asked where he got into another fight. Just then, Zhongchan's men came running after Doyle, one of them complaining about how fast he walked. Choi Ho-chang stepped up, said he was from Ilgyang High School, and told Doyle to come here for a second. He crooked a finger at him, mocking him for ignoring the call. Doyle didn't bite. Instead, he calmly asked Dong-gu if that 50,000 won offer still stood. Dong gave a weak smile and joked back. Did he want severance pay too? That answer set Hyo-chang off. He called Doyle a skinny punk and snapped, asking if he ever listened. He decided a quick beating would make Doyle pay attention. But before he could act, Doyle threw the cup in his hand straight at his face, grabbed his arm and slammed him hard onto the ground. Hyo-chang cried out in pain as Doyle kept going, pinning him down and hammering him with brutal punches. His friends could only stare, horrified, as Doyle beat him senseless. When Doyle finally stopped, he took a breath and walked off, leaving the other two too scared to move. Then he stopped in front of Dong-gi and asked again if there was a performance bonus. Later, Doyle and Dong-gi sat down to eat. Dong-gi dug into a special noodle dish and called it a legendary masterpiece. He said nothing at a normal restaurant could beat it for the price, then asked what Doyle thought. Doyle said it would be better with fried pork, and Dong-gi instantly yelled that those two did not go together at all. Doyle ignored that and got straight back to business, asking how much the performance bonus would be. Flustered, Dong-gi said he needed time to think, so Doyle named his own price, 5 million won. Dong-gi spit out his food in shock, and Doyle added one more condition: the job had to be done within a week. The job was wiping out the Ilgyang High School gang. Dong-gi burst out laughing like Doyle had said the dumbest thing possible. When he asked why Doyle needed that much money, Doyle reminded him his father had frozen all his accounts. Dong-gi brushed it off, wondering if that blackhead group was involved again. then started blaming Doyle for the mess he lived in. Doyle fired back, scolding Dong-gi for being rich and still letting people beat him up all the time. He told him to transfer to some private school without bullies and asked if his parents really said nothing when they saw those bruises. Dong-gi answered that his parents weren't in Korea right now. Doyle told him to stop getting beat up and then grinning like an idiot. That's exactly why people keep using him. After he finished eating, Doyle thanked him and said he was leaving, which caught Dong-gi off guard. As Doyle walked off, Dong-gi waved goodbye and told him to get home safe. On the way back, Doyle was surprised to run into Mina again and wondered why she kept showing up everywhere. She took it as lucky for her. Elsewhere, Im Jong-chan stood over his injured men with his fist clenched in anger. He ordered them to call Park Kang-wook from Sumun High right away. School then shouted his name at the top of his lungs. Meanwhile, Park Kang-wook was at home in his bathroom yelling and wondering why people kept dragging him back into this. Ilgyung High was one of Seoul's 3 worst delinquent schools, controlling the southwest area. Most of the students either had juvenile records or were known troublemakers. The school was so out of control that students even had their own smoking room. Even the teachers were crooked, taking bribes and looking the other way while students broke the law. There were even rumors the principal used to be a gangster. But the biggest problem there was the 12 Nations gang and its leader Bae Chae-ol. Bae Chae-ol used brute force to unite all the school split groups, and now he made money through the school in all kinds of illegal ways, from stealing motorcycles and insurance scams, to sex crimes by minors, extortion, threats against restaurants, and more. People said Bae Chae-ol was so brutal he might have even killed someone before. Meanwhile, Dong-gu walked with Doyle in a panic, wondering if Doyle understood they were heading straight into danger. He asked where Doyle even got those weird masks, and Doyle shot back by asking why Dong-gu was carrying a weapon. Calmly, Doyle said his bullets were rubber. Then he gave a strange tip: your body is something you use up, so take care of it. Well, right after that, he reminded Dong-gu about the 5 million won bonus, and Dong-gu yelled at him to quit talking nonsense. Dong-gu begged him to turn back, saying Ilgyung was so bad that even local cops joked about how many reports came from there. Doyle said that only made it better, which confused and scared Dong-gu even more. When they arrived, Doyle walked up to a student and bluntly asked if he was Bae Chae-ol, stunning everyone around him. The student saw his Sumun school uniform and couldn't believe he was crazy enough to say their leader's name like that. Without waiting for an answer, Doyle shot the student in the leg. Then he fired a rubber bullet into his head and dropped him instantly. The other student froze, then angrily demanded to know who this lunatic was. Doyle said nothing. When the student rushed him, Doyle blocked him with his foot and shot his foot with the rifle. Then he smashed the rifle into the student's shoulder, breaking it and making him scream in pain. After overpowering him, Doyle grabbed him, aimed the rifle at his head, and ordered him to bring Bae Chae-ol. Elsewhere in the school, Im Young-beom was still dizzy from Doyle's earlier hit and cursed him as a sneaky bastard. He thought that if today wasn't collection day, he'd already be hunting Doyle down. Then he heard gunshots nearby. A student ran up in a panic and told him something was seriously wrong. Young-beom asked if the leader had shown up, but the student, out of breath, said the bastard from Sumun school they fought yesterday had come back. Elsewhere, Im Jong-chan got a call from one of his guys, but all he heard was panicked nonsense about a spy and a weapon. Jong-chan lost patience and yelled at him to say it clearly. Park Kang-wook desperately thought none of this had anything to do with him. Doyle tore through the school, leaving Jong-chan's men hurt all over the place. In a hallway, Doyle cornered a girl and asked if she was Bae Chae-ol. She screamed no, and Dong-gui hurriedly told him Bae Chae-ol was a guy. Doyle shot him a cold look and said he should have mentioned that sooner. Right then, someone tossed a juice box at him from behind, but he dodged it easily. After that, the students started calling him totally insane. Young-beom showed up with his crew and stared at the mess in disbelief, wondering who Doyle really was. He shouted at Doyle, asking if he was out of his mind for walking straight into enemy territory. As students closed in from every side, Doyle tried to fire back but ran out of rubber bullets, so he dropped the rifle and got ready to fight barehanded. Im Young-beom cursed at Kim Doyle, calling him crazy and asking if he had a death wish. Then Young-beom charged in with a punch, but Doyle blocked it with ease and slipped a hand inside his clothes like he was about to pull something out. That made Young-beom freeze for a second, wondering what kind of trick this was. Doyle flatly said it was just a fake-out, then drove a hard kick into his stomach. Meanwhile, in Ilgyung High School's annex, a new teacher named Ha Jung-ju watched the chaos and said they should call the police. Another teacher told her to stay out of student business and remember the principal's orders. Even so, he admitted he'd never seen things this bad, not even during the Bae Chae-ol incident. Then the security camera feed suddenly went dead. A moment later, their phones lost signal too, leaving both teachers worried about what was happening. Elsewhere, in the gym, a huge student casually lifted 200 kilos while the others watched with awe and fear. After his set, he drank a protein shake and asked what was going on. One of his followers told him all executives had been ordered back to school within 20 minutes. When he asked why, they said a spy had broken in. This was Park Jin-guil, Ilgyung High's number 3. The story then jumps to the past, when Young-beom was told he had a special gift. He was a born fighter, and people said his fist was heaven sent after he took down a whole group of older students by himself. Young-beom refused to live like everyone else. He couldn't hide how much he hated looking down at people he saw as beneath him. Back in the present, he faced Doyle and still couldn't land a hit. Doyle's longer reach kept him out of range. Even so, Yongbyeom kept trying to get in close, hoping Doyle wouldn't be able to dodge. He threw a straight punch, but Doyle slipped past it in a flash. Then Doyle answered with a brutal punch that dropped Yongbyeom to the floor. It was a crushing loss. Yongbyeom tried to rise, but Doyle gave him no time and kicked at his face. Somehow, Yongbyeom barely avoided it. Angry and shaken, he wondered who this guy was that had come out of nowhere. He'd never heard the name before, but he remembered Doyle blasting a soccer ball at him full force. That was when Yongbyeom realized in horror that Doyle had really meant to kill him with that kick. Kim Doyle praised his reflexes, then coldly said he had actually been aiming to cripple him. He added that begging was useless once this fight started. Yongbyeom's end was already set. Doyle decided to start with his legs so he wouldn't be walking for a safe. Yongbyeom snapped back, asking why nobody was talking such trash. Furious now, he demanded to know if Doyle even understood who he was. Then he called him worthless garbage and attacked again. Still ranting about Doyle acting cocky on his turf, Yongbyeom kept swinging, but Doyle easily avoided the blow and smashed him in the face before he could react. After that came a barrage of fast, heavy punches, followed by another hard shot to the face that sent him back to the ground. Yongbyeom pushed himself up, coughing blood, and Doyle mocked him for being just a high school kid. Dongbab screamed at his followers for just standing there and ordered them to grab Doyle right away. But none of them moved. They were too scared to step in. Meanwhile, at Suman High School, Taejongchan kept trying to call someone, but no one picked up. Around him, Suman students whispered nervously after spotting Ilgyong students, including Im Jongchan, inside their school. Then one stepped in, the strict teacher at Suman, and demanded to know why they kept sneaking onto campus. He told them to come over to him. They ignored him completely and started walking off. Annoyed at being brushed off, one called them disrespectful. Jongchan stopped and calmly turned back toward him. One asked what their problem was and why they kept entering other schools. Without warning, Jongchan pulled out a knife and stabbed one in the stomach. Then he glared at him and warned that he should know who he was dealing with before acting like a teacher. One froze, unable to speak, shocked and terrified by what had just happened. Then Jongchan shoved him down to the floor and sarcastically asked if he wanted to die. Jongchan calmly walked to one of his men and placed the bloody knife in his hand like nothing had happened, while one kept bleeding in stunned silence. Elsewhere, Taejongchan confronted one of his men and accused him of stabbing one. He ordered them to take every student's phone, search them all, and then turn themselves into team leader Park Chung-sik at the Southern Police Station. Coldly, he said the sentence wouldn't be more than 2 years and 6 months, and they obeyed in fear. Then Jongchan and his men walked away. Back to Doyle. He mocked the beaten Jongbab and told him to do his rehab right if he didn't want to end up in a wheelchair forever. Jongbab laughed back in defiance, which annoyed Doyle enough to threaten his wrist next. Still down, Jongbab warned Kim Doyle that he had no idea what kind of trouble he was in, and asked if he knew how dangerous their leader was. Doyle ignored that and just asked whether the leader was Ba-Cheol. Jongbab insisted Doyle was going to die for this, but Doyle brushed it off as nonsense and asked again where Ba-Cheol was. Right then, someone new called Doyle's name and kicked at him. It was Park Jin-gu, the school's number 3, asking if Doyle was the one who ruined his friend's training. Dongbab watched in horror, sure Doyle had taken a deadly kick to the head, but Doyle had blocked it with his arm. Then he asked this new guy the same thing. Was he Ba-Cheol? Dongbab said yes, and Dongbab immediately yelled that he was obviously lying. The story cuts to Busan on a rainy night. 3 men hung upside down, covered in blood and signs of torture. One of them was Kangdaf Cheol, the number 4 of the Nampo Orium group. Someone handed their leader a phone, and the voice on the line asked who did this. The answer was Kim Doyle. That caller was Ba-Cheol, leader of the 12 nations. Back at the school, Doyle grabbed cleaning supplies and attacked Jingo by spraying glass cleaner into his eyes. Jingo swung hard, but Doyle dodged easily and smacked him in the face with a cleaning rag. Jingo's men stared in shock. They couldn't believe someone was beating their powerhouse leader with janitor tools. Jingo yelled that Doyle was a coward for fighting so dirty. Jingo yelled to dodge another huge punch from Jingo, and it smashed a metal locker apart. Jingo compared him to a mosquito that wouldn't stay still. Still, he was sure one solid hit would finish him. As the fight went on, Park Jin-gu kept trying to figure out what weird weapon Doyle was using against him. The stranger's messy style only made Jin-gu madder. He cursed Doyle as a damn mosquito, and swore to crush him to death. Doyle grabbed a chair as a shield, and sprayed cleaner into Jin-gu's face again. Jin-gu screamed as it burned its way into his nose. Doyle used the opening and cracked him hard across the head. Furious, Jin-gu called him the king of cowards, and swore he'd never forgive this. He bragged about all the protein he'd used to build his body, saying a cheap trick like this wouldn't bring him down, and demanded to know if Doyle thought he was easy prey. Doyle answered by throwing his shirt in Jin-gu's face to distract him, then blasted him with a kick to the face. Jin-gu crashed to the ground. Even in serious pain, he tried to rise and kept cursing Doyle. Then he looked up and saw Doyle charging straight at him. Doyle threw another shirt over Jin-gu's face and beat him down without mercy. Jin-gu's followers could only watch, shocked and scared. When the fight was over, Doyle stood there calmly and said Act 1 was finished, leaving Jingu's men confused. Then he walked up to them and said they'd caught Bae Cheol. Jingu's followers were terrified. They'd only ever seen their leader this helpless against the captain. Meanwhile, Donggu kept yelling that the guy on the ground was not Bae Cheol, while Doyle demanded 500,000 won in cash from Donggu and refused any bank transfer. Ignoring Donggu's protest, Doyle said Jingu claimed to be Bae Cheol, so the money still counted. Then he picked up his weapon and left. Jingu's followers didn't dare move, too scared Doyle might come back. A few hours later, Zhongchan and his group returned to the school and found his beaten followers scattered everywhere. Jingu Donj burned with anger after getting embarrassed in his own school. The next day, Saturday, the anime club met up. Donggu was talking with another member who was stunned to hear that teacher Doyle had been sent to the hospital. The student said, I'm Jung Chan from Elgyang School, suddenly showed up and tore the place apart while searching for Doyle. Doyle, busy eating a school meal, brushed it off. Jung Chan was just one of Bag Doyle's underlings, and now that the boss was caught, the rest wouldn't come back. Donggu snapped, saying again, they never caught Bae Doyle, then glared at Doyle and demanded to know where he got a school meal on a weekend. Doyle said he found it in the teacher's cafeteria, which only made Donggu madder, since that food was for the teachers on duty. Donggu said this whole mess was their fault for picking a fight with Ilgyang School, admitting they never should have messed with them. Another club member agreed. He suggested they visit teacher Du Cheol in the hospital since they were partly to blame, then asked Doyle to come too. Doyle said no. Donggu argued that Doyle should go because this might all be because of them. He even tried guilt and excuses, saying he was scared to walk around alone lately. Right then, Mina popped in and cheerfully said she'd go with them too. Donggu stared at her, shocked to see her in what he called a nerd club, and said she looked more like she belonged in film club. Mina ignored him and happily greeted Doyle. Mina said she joined the anime club because she suddenly felt like watching anime. As she talked about how meeting Doyle here must be fate, he caught her off guard by putting his toy gun against her head and said he'd make it fate himself. Donggu lit up at the sight, recognizing it as a Glock G26, and begged to touch it. Doyle charged 2,000 won per touch, and Donggu started yelling for everyone, especially Mina, not to line up for the gun. At the hospital, teacher Wang Do-cheol's wife told him the injury wasn't too serious, but he still needed to rest. Do-cheol refused. Midterms were close, and to him this injury was nothing serious. He said he'd be back at work next week. His wife scolded him for being stubborn and asked if he still thought he was in his younger days. She told him plainly that he was not fine. Donggu and Mina walked through the hospital hallway, and Mina asked where Doyle was. Annoyed, Donggu said he had no idea. Doyle refused to come because the teacher once punished him with cleaning duty. Then Doyle suddenly came in through the window, and Donggu yelled that they were on the 3rd floor. Mina demanded to know where Doyle had been, saying there was no point coming to the hospital without him. Donggu told her to leave if she wasn't going to stick with him. After bickering for a bit, Mina refused to go home after coming all this way. Donggu reached the teacher's room and moved to open the door, but stopped when he saw Do-cheol's wife holding his hand. She reminded him they'd been married for 20 years, said she knew him well, and begged him to stop keeping everything inside before it broke him. Elsewhere in the hospital, Doyle was heading down the hall to visit Do-cheol. On the way, he remembered Do-cheol punishing him with 2 weeks of cleaning the 2nd floor bathroom. But after that, the teacher had stopped him and asked if he lived with his mother and little brother. Doyle also remembered Do-cheol warning him not to cause trouble since he was the man of the house. The teacher had even given him his personal number, telling him to call if he ever needed help from an adult. Doyle told Doyle to stand straight and reminded him that everyone is reckless at that age. He also told him to live with pride and not do anything shameful, because a man's pride means everything. Feeling guilty, Doyle realized this whole mess started because of him, so he decided to leave the drinks he brought and slip away quietly. But when he neared Doyle's room, he found Donggu and Mina standing outside in silence. Inside, teacher Wang Do-cheol was crying hard, crushed by humiliation. He blamed himself for failing as a teacher and head of discipline. He was supposed to protect his students, not be humiliated in front of them. Donggu and Solmisna listened from outside as Do-cheol kept breaking down in shame. He wondered how he could ever face his students after being humiliated by someone as young as his own son. To him, facing their eyes again felt impossible. He said he wasn't fit to be a teacher anymore. Do-cheol kept sobbing, unable to make any excuse for what happened. Elsewhere, Zhongchan knelt before his long-haired leader, Bae Cheol, and confessed that one person had wrecked the whole school. He said he had no excuse. He called it an unforgivable failure and begged for one more chance to catch the attacker. Bae Cheol turned him down coldly, saying Zhongchan had failed to understand the order. If he really meant to make up for it, Bae Cheol said he would have already brought Kim Doyle in. Then Bae Cheol said it was time for Zhongchan to pay for his mistake. Zhongchan accepted right away, saying he'd take whatever punishment came. Bae Cheol named it 10 million won in a week, plus Zhongchan's left earlobe. Zhongchan agreed without hesitation. After confirming the intruder was Kim Doyle, Bae Cheol gave one last order, bring Doyle to him within 3 days. Later, at an arcade, Doyle played a shooting game while Donggu watched. Doyle mocked him for smiling even when he gets hit, saying that's why people treat him like a fool. He brought up their first meeting at the convenience store, when he warned Dong-gu he'd die if he didn't walk away. Dong-gu tried to explain that he doesn't get beaten because he's stupid. It's because he wasn't always someone people pushed around. He remembered bullies taking his money and laughing at him for telling the teachers. After getting beaten every day, he admitted he may really have turned into a fool. Doyle stayed glued to the game and barely listened to any of it. Minna, who was there too, told Dong-gu to move because she and Doyle were on a date. Then Doyle told her to get lost too. Dong-gu felt completely fed up. He finally blew up, asking how they could be playing around at a time like this, while Minna joined in and cheered Doyle on. Dong-gu remembered begging Doyle before, reminding him how strong he was and asking for help, only to get shut down cold. At that point, he gave up on changing Doyle's mind. So Dong-gu grabbed his stuff and said he was leaving. He didn't want to hear Doyle whine about money again. As he walked off, Doyle called after him, and Dong-gu wondered if his trick had worked. Doyle said he took Dong-gu's lunchbox, adding that it had his special fried pork inside. Dong-gu instantly snatched it back and said it was his, now since he paid for it. That night in the rain, Jong-chan's group was questioning Park Kang-wook. They knew Kim Doyle's follower was buying an apartment in the complex, and demanded the building and unit number. Kang-wook nervously said he didn't know. Choi Hyo-chang got mad, but Kang-wook swore he'd been trying to call and got no answer, so he really didn't know the number. He started whining about his rotten luck and how he always gets dragged into trouble that has nothing to do with him. Then Choi Hyo-chang hit him. He cursed Kang-wook out, saying instead of calling someone who wouldn't pick up, he should have found another way, like calling the younger kids around him. Then they beat him without mercy. As the punches kept coming, Park Kang-wook wondered what he'd done to deserve this. People nearby started gathering to watch. One gang member shouted at a woman to mind her own business and keep moving. Then Choi Hyo-chang yanked Park Kang-wook up by the hair and gave him 1 hour to bring Doyle, or he'd die. Kang-wook desperately wondered why he had to die for Doyle. He started begging someone in the crowd to call the police. Then Dong-gu showed up under an umbrella. Park Kang-wook spotted him right away and pointed him out as Kim Doyle's follower. He kept shouting Dong-gu's name, calling him Doyle's servant and slave. In a nearby alley, Choi Hyo-chang told Jong-chan that Dong-gu still wouldn't cooperate. He asked what to do next, since any more beating might knock him out. Jong-chan walked up to Dong-gu, angry that weak little nobodies were making things this hard. Then he asked Dong-gu if he really didn't know who they were. He said the rumors should have spread through the school by now, especially after what they did to one of the teachers. Dong-gu remembered teacher Dong Chae-il crying over what had been done to him. Jong-chan tried to pressure him, saying they only needed to lure Doyle out, and Dong-gu would end up calling him anyway. With a mocking tone, he asked what Dong-gu thought he could do here. Dong-gu remembered his father insulting him and saying he was just like his mother. Jong-chan offered him a deal. Make the call, tell Doyle to come to their hideout, and he could live. But Dong-gu, bloody and beaten, quietly said he wasn't a fool. Then he lifted his head and glared at them, saying again that he wasn't the idiot they were. Park Kang-wook was stunned by that, and the others wondered if they'd beaten Dong-gaek too hard. Suddenly, Jong-chan burst out laughing. Then he slashed Dong-gaek across the face. Dong-gaek screamed in pain. Jong-chan grabbed his face and told him to shut up. He sneered, asking if Dong-gaek thought they were equals, just because he dared talk back to him. Jong-chan kept insulting him, calling him worthless trash, and saying if he's told to kneel, he kneels right away. Jong-chan yanked Dong-gu up by the collar and told him to quit acting brave after getting beaten, saying it only made him look stupid. Dong-gu thought back on all the days he had to live under other people's bullying. He stared back with defiance, and Jong-chan snapped, asking if he didn't understand Korean. Then Jong-chan told him to keep his head down. A hard punch followed, and the beating kept going. Park Kang-wook said Dong-gu was only making it worse by fighting back. But Jong-chan was already irritated and bored. He told his men that once Dong-gu woke up, they should force him to bring Kim Doyle, even if they had to rip his mouth open. Even after that brutal beating, Dong-gu still called Jong-chan a bastard. Dong-gu remembered what Jong-chan had done to his teacher, and knew the gang was the one truly at fault. He couldn't understand why the victims were being called idiots when the real problem was the people hurting them. Park Kang-wook yelled at him to shut up. Dong-gu fired back that everything would be fine if people like Jong-chan didn't exist. Still shouting, Dong-gu said the bullies were the ones who didn't belong. To him, they were the real fools. That finally broke Jong-chan's patience, and he pulled out a knife. He mocked Dong-gu for still talking through all those injuries, calling him a kid lost in his own fantasy. Then he grabbed him and threatened to gouge out an eye to see if he'd keep talking after that. Park Kang-wook cried out, worried for Dong-gu, but froze before he could act. A gunshot had just gone off. Doyle suddenly showed up and ordered them to stop. Then he complained about the ammo, saying he'd asked for rubber bullets. Without caring about their reaction, Doyle kept walking forward through the rain. Choi Hyo-chang was stunned. He recognized him right away as the troublemaker from the burger place and shouted, Kim Doyle? Jong-chan glared at Doyle with raw hatred, blaming him for everything that had happened. Doyle walked straight to Dong-gu and asked if he'd switched their phones on purpose. He showed the phone with its shattered screen and asked who broke it. Then he turned to Jong-chan's group and asked if they were responsible. In a cold voice, Doyle said they needed to be taught a lesson, and he was going all out. Jong-chan gave a mocking smile and started introducing himself, admitting he was the one who broke the phone, and welcoming Doyle. He didn't get to finish. Doyle rushed him first. Zhang Chan couldn't follow Doyle's speed and just stood there unable to move. Doyle told him he wouldn't forgive what he did. At the same time, Choi Ka-chang recalled the legend of Zhang Chan. At one big gathering, all 21 members of the Lee Ho-chul gang were there. By the end of that day, every one of them was left badly hurt and fighting for his life. And the one who did it was just a 13-year-old boy, Im Zhang Chan. Choi Tong-shel couldn't believe a kid that young had beaten men twice his size, especially a gang so vicious even the police didn't want to deal with them. After that, Zhang Chan's name spread across South Seoul. People started calling him the Ghost. And now that same Ghost was getting crushed by Doyle without landing even one hit. Shaking, Zhang Chan wondered what Doyle had done to him and asked if he'd been drugged, because none of this made sense. Desperate, he rushed Doyle with his knife, refusing to accept that someone like Doyle could beat him. But Doyle slipped past the stab with ease. The Ghost kept slashing again and again, just trying to land one hit, but Doyle avoided every attack. Then Doyle finally went on a fence and drove in an uppercut. Zhang Chan saw the punches coming, but shock hit him. He still couldn't dodge. He tried to steady himself and figure it out, but the more he thought, the less he understood what was happening to him. Then he screamed, demanding to know what Doyle had done to him. In the middle of shouting, pain exploded through his body like his ribs had snapped. Doyle only called it a dramatic act. Looking down at the collapsing Zhang Chan, Doyle asked why he was blaming someone else for his own weakness. He said there was a simple reason Zhang Chan couldn't accept this. He hadn't been beaten enough. Then Doyle coldly told him to come closer so he could fix that. That taunt pushed Zhang Chan over the edge. Grinding his teeth, he cursed Doyle and charged again. Doyle slipped around every swing with ease. That only made Zhang Chan madder. He cursed Doyle as a slippery bastard and yelled at him to stop dodging and take the hits. Even though Zhang Chan could see the punches coming, his body just couldn't avoid them. He had to admit Doyle's speed felt unreal, so fast he couldn't follow it or react in time. Doyle kept hammering him with heavy blows. Zhang Chan staggered, barely staying up. Doyle calmly remarked on how stubborn he was and said that was fine, it just gave him more chances to hit him. Park Kang-wook and Dong watched in shock. Park Kang-wook yelled that Doyle was insane and wondered if he was really doing all this over a plate of pork. Doyle told Zhang Chan to come closer. He stepped up to the worn-out Zhang Chan and asked, almost politely, what part he wanted broken first. When Zhang Chan said nothing, Choi Hun-chang just stared, unable to believe Zhang Chan had ended up so pathetic on the stairs. Doyle chose for him and said he'd start with the jaw. Zhang Chan knew the hit was coming, and he also knew he couldn't block it or dodge. Then Doyle suddenly stopped. Even before the punch came, Zhang Chan started screaming like he'd lost his mind. Choi Hun-chang could only stare, confused about why he was screaming like that. Zhang Chan looked stunned by what Doyle did, like he'd never seen anything like it before. He remembered that strange, creepy feeling from the first time he saw Doyle. In Zhang Chan's terrified eyes, Doyle started to look like some dark demon, and Zhang Chan realized in horror that this wasn't someone he could ever overcome. Doyle ended it with a brutal uppercut that smashed into Zhang Chan's chin and finished him. That last punch completely wrecked Zhang Chan's jaw. Even then, Doyle kept beating him on the ground while Dong Ga and the others watched in horror. Now sure he was a monster. At the hospital, the teacher and his wife stood in their room with warm drinks, unaware of the violence happening outside. Once he was done with Zhang Chan, Doyle stood over the body in silence. Then he turned a cold stare on the rest of the gang who were already shaking, and he started walking toward them, slow and calm. The story then cuts to the hideout of a group called the Tiger Clan. Inside, men were lying everywhere, bloodied and beaten. Their leader, Bae Chao, sat there calmly eating a meal. He was thinking about an offer from someone named Nam Bo Wong, but when he went to meet him, it turned out nothing like what he'd been told on the phone. So Bae Chao tortured him and sliced his Achilles tendon. He accused the tied-up man of playing games behind his back and mocked how greedy he was. The man flinched in agony when Bae Chao jabbed the wound with his chopsticks. Then Bae Chao gave him 2 days to finish his business in Busan and join them. After that, he ordered him to come along. The man instantly nodded yes, again and again, shaking from pain and fear. When he finished eating, Bae Chao said he'd trust his word. He even wished him a good day, though the look in his eyes said otherwise. Then he quietly walked out. Outside, one of his men, Kang Hyuk-chal, the top fighter at Ilgyeong School, told him Zhang Chan was calling and said it was urgent. Bae Chao took the phone and answered, but a strange voice asked right away, "Are you Bae Chao?" Around him, his men were already down, exhausted and covered in blood. Shock and anger spread across his face. The caller was Kim Doyle, using Zhang Chan's phone to contact the gang leader. Standing in the rainy alley among Bae Chao's beaten followers, Doyle coldly said he heard they had been looking for him. A twisted smile spread across Bae Chao's face as he listened to Doyle standing right in front of him. Elsewhere, Ilgyeong School's principal was having barbecue with a teacher. The teacher said he was seriously worried. Internal trouble was one thing, but this time an outsider had entered the school and beaten students. He asked what would happen if parents or the media found out. The principal brushed it off and sarcastically asked what kind of decent people would even send their kids to a place like Ilgyeong. He said most of the students were orphans, came from broken homes or had already been abandoned by their parents, and even the rest came from families barely getting by. According to him, nobody outside cared about a trash school like Ilgyung. He told the teacher to bury the whole thing, saying making noise would only hurt them. Still, the principal said this case felt different, like something they should never touch had entered the school. To him it was something filthy. Meanwhile, in another alley, Doyle threw Kang Hyukal, one of B.A. Cal's men, out of a window. Hyukal managed to land cleanly, and Doyle noticed he used a shock-absorbing technique. Even so, Hyukal was stunned, because even though he could clearly see Doyle's attacks, he still couldn't dodge them. From experience, he knew he couldn't win by trading punches. Still, he was sure that if he grabbed Doyle, the fight would turn. No one could beat his raw strength, and he planned to crush Doyle's skull. Hyukal rushed in and reached for him, thinking for a second that he'd caught him, but Doyle slipped right out. That only made Hyukal madder, and he cursed him again for being so slippery. Doyle took that opening and fired off a brutal combo that almost dropped him. As Hyukal cried out, Doyle drove one hard punch straight into his face. At the same time, Doyle carried the hurt Donggu on his back and made his way up the stairs through the rain. In a weak voice, Donggu asked if the cut on his nose would leave a scar. He groaned that he'd have to look at it every day in the mirror. Doyle, clearly annoyed, told him to stop asking dumb questions or he'd leave him there. Donggu thought that was just unfair. The pain was bad enough, but a scar that stayed forever felt even worse, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. Meanwhile, the fight kept going. Kang Hyuk-chel tried to figure out who Doyle really was. He couldn't believe this guy had tossed someone out a window and was now hitting to kill. Even with death right in front of him, he still pushed that thought away as nonsense. Then a memory hit him. Back when B.A. Cowles told him he wasn't ordinary, he remembered being a gifted martial arts champion, and B.A. Cowles saying the world was unfair for keeping talent like his from the top. B.A. Cowles had promised to guide him and make him someone special. That memory fired him up. Hugh Cal got back on his feet. Sure, he was chosen by B.A. Cal and refusing to be shamed by Doyle. He charged again, convinced one solid grab would end it. This time, Hugh Chel came in with a plan against the wrestler. He aimed for Doyle's face, using a fake high punch as bait, and it worked. Doyle raised his guard, Hyuk Shell caught his arm, and for a moment he smiled, sure the fight was over. He went for a final hip throw, but Doyle didn't move at all. He couldn't lift him even a little. Then it hit him. Doyle had spread the force into the ground with perfect balance, something only pros could do. Before Hyuk Shell could process it, Doyle hit him with a savage counter throw and slammed him into the ground. He hit hard and screamed. That broke Hyuk Shell mentally. He couldn't make sense of any of it and shouted that none of this made sense. Now he understood. Doyle was the kind of fighter who broke every rule, beating people no matter their size or style. In all his years fighting, Hyuk Shell had never seen anyone like him. Earlier, Dongoff had told Doyle how safe he felt around him. He said he'd pay whatever it took, that this shouldn't be just a job, and begged Doyle to truly care about them too. Remembering that, Doyle kicked Hyuk Shell hard and sent him flying, like an answer to Dongoff's wish for someone to protect the weaker students. Doyle seemed affected by those words. But then police lights showed up and an officer walked over asking who they were and saying he'd gotten a report about an assault. That call for help had come from Donggu. The officer told Doyle to raise his hands and come forward slowly. Before Doyle could answer, BHL suddenly appeared and struck the officer, dropping him cold. The second officer froze in shock beside his fallen partner. Then BHL got behind him and took him down too. With both officers beaten, BHL calmly laid out his belief that violence was the fastest, easiest way to get results. To him, it simply worked. He said this was one of those times when going back to violence was necessary, and wondered if he should step in himself. Then he mocked society for banning something so useful. BHL said he felt a connection with Doyle and offered friendship. He promised to make Doyle's talent even greater, saying power like theirs should be rewarded. He even quoted a Yakuza boss who claimed money gives violence meaning, and violence builds empires, then asked Doyle to join him. Doyle answered with chilling calm. The man Balachel quoted, he said was already dead. When Balachel stared in confusion, Doyle added that he was the one who killed him, then punched him across the face. A flashback briefly showed the dead Yakuza boss. Elsewhere, the principal of Ilgyung School, Im Chung-suk, was still talking with the teacher. The teacher asked what that dirty thing was that had gotten into the school. The principal, sweating, could only think about Doyle's real identity. He remembered Doyle's threat to expose one of his secrets, along with the warning not to interfere with the gang attack on the school. What he couldn't understand was how a mere student had stolen internal data from the Hala Club, a group protected like a national treasure, and used it to blackmail him. Back in the alley, B.A. Hyuk Shell realized Doyle had turned him down. With a sly grin, he asked if that meant they wouldn't be friends. Doyle said nothing. Still, one look from him told B.I. Hyuk this was no normal high schooler. Then the story shifts to B.I. Hyuk's past. He starts by bringing up the serial killer Albert Bundy, who once argued that everyone dies anyway, so were killers really that bad? B.I. Hyuk was drawn to Bundy's story. The man had murdered around 30 women and acted like he had only changed the day they died. That idea thrilled B.A. Hyuk. To him, controlling death sounded amazing, but even Albert Bundy had to pay in the end. At a police station, a young Bae Chel was asked if he had tried to kill his little brother Jiho for crying. The boy admitted he had warned Jiho again and again to stop, so in his mind his brother was the one at fault. And like Bundy, Bae Chel also paid. He was punished under Article 10 of the Juvenile Act. But the story points out that not everyone pays for what they do. Sakatsu Bushino, leader of attacks for the Japanese Okita group, was cleared after killing 7 members of a rival gang. In another case, Jung Swol Ak-hyo, the son of Congressman Jung Tae-hwan, avoided punishment for killing an 11-year-old girl while drunk driving because people claimed he wasn't the one behind the wheel. That was the moment Bae Chel found his life's goal. He realized that money, fame, and power could turn someone into a special being, even a god who decides other people's fates. In another memory, Bae Chel told his little brother Jiho why he had tried to kill him. Jiho looked too much like him. And to Bae Chel, this world only had space for one of them. He wanted to become a god. Back in the present, Bae Chel proudly declared that he was special. Doyle answered with a sudden kick and punch. Bae Chel couldn't even process it. He stared in confusion, wondering how Doyle moved before he had even begun. Doyle mocked him, asking if he'd been hit in the head, then calmly said the answer was simple. He was just faster, and he was only messing around. Doyle added that he hadn't met someone like Bae Chel in a long time and wondered if he really was just ordinary. Meanwhile, Bae Chel thought about all the people he'd already surpassed to reach this point. What was happening now felt completely new to him. Doyle cut him off coldly, telling him not to talk if he was only going to say garbage. As they traded blows, Bae Chel found Doyle more and more interesting. Then Doyle called him a talentless copycat for seeing his move and stealing it. Their fight exploded into a faster, fiercer clash, and even while bleeding, Bae Chel kept smiling, still saying Doyle was interesting. Doyle noticed Bae Chel's attacks were getting faster and stronger. The exchange kept raging as Doyle slipped past punch after punch and landed a clean hit. But Doyle was surprised when Bae Chel managed to avoid the next attack. While Bae Chel laughed and kept coming, Doyle started to see the pattern. Bae Chel's strength, willpower, and speed were all rising as the fight went on. His natural gift was clear, especially his speed. Doyle never expected to meet someone like that in a Korean high school. Then he noticed Bae Chel get even faster again and understood he really was far from normal. Still, Doyle saw that his attacks, while fast, were shallow. He read the pattern easily. 3 left punches in a row to hide the real strike from the right. To Doyle, that trick was cheap. Bae Chel asked if someone on his level wasn't impressive, then snapped out a heavy left that seemed to land cleanly. Certain he'd connected, Bae Chel declared that nothing could stop him from rising above everyone because that was his fate. Doyle called the whole speech embarrassing and asked why he was acting like this, then suddenly caught the punch. Bae Chel froze, unable to understand how. Doyle squeezed his hand tight and said sure, Bae Paul wasn't ordinary, but his level was barely good enough for local streets. This, Doyle said, was Bae Paul's real level, and he should know his place. Then Doyle started crushing his hand. That made Bae Paul freeze for a second, wondering what Doyle meant by follow me, and Doyle used that opening to smash him in the face. Bae Paul was stunned, not even sure what had just happened. Then he realized he couldn't see from his left eye. He hadn't even noticed Doyle move, and that only made it more confusing. Doyle brushed it off and coldly told him to shut his mouth. Then, with one more crushing hit, he dropped Bae Paul and knocked him out cold. Somewhere else, in the rain, a man asked if they had reached Boss Park's place. The other man said yes, and added that Bae Paul had already made his move. This was Yoo Jong-sok, the number 2 of Nampo Orium, but he hadn't heard from Bae Paul since morning, and he warned that getting mixed up with him could turn ugly fast. He said that as long as Bae Paul was in Seoul, he'd handle anyone tied to Seok-dong or the National Union deal. Then both men suddenly stopped when Yoo Jong-sok saw Bae Paul collapsed on the ground. He stared in disbelief, wondering if that was really Bae Paul. Not far away, Doyle stood there without a word. At another place, Joo Ha-young, one of Nampo Orium's leaders, found a hallway packed with Boss Park's men, all completely beaten. Joo Ha-young said the Ilgyong school guys were brutally harsh, wrongly thinking they had done this. Seeing Bae Paul's state, he figured the damage might be permanent. He asked Joo Ha-young who could have done this much damage to Bae Paul. Joo Ha-young started doubting whether sending Bae Paul had been the right call, but Joo Ha-young cut him off and told him not to rush to conclusions. The story then moves to the crooked cop Park Chung-sik, who got a message saying his phone had been hacked. Furious, he wondered who would dare mess with a police officer's phone. The message listed Ilgang School's crimes, including the stabbing at Suman School, along with every bribe he had taken, backed up by footage and photos. It ended with a clear warning. This is a threat. Panicked, the officer wondered who could be behind this. Then we see Jor Young, who says this young man is the real thing, and if he keeps going, they'll meet sooner or later. After Kim Doyle's win, everything at Suman High changed. Doyle started getting treated like a king. Students crowded around him, and Solmina showed up calling it her husband's day, chasing everyone else away. Some even said it was an honor to serve the king of the South. Flyers made by Dong-gu spread all over school, saying Kim Doyle of the Thunder Fist now ruled South Seoul, and anyone who stepped out of line would be hunted down. The old bullies felt like they had lost their place. complaining that school wasn't the same anymore. While Dong-gu handed out flyers, Mina laughed and said paper ads were old news in the age of social media. He shot back that nobody cared about their accounts anyway. The washed-up bullies kept grieving the power and status they had lost. Doyle, though, didn't care much. The overblown reactions around him were starting to get on his nerves. Later, on the way home, Dong-guek told Doyle he had left the bonus money in his locker. He thanked him, saying life had been happy every day since Doyle transferred in. Dong-gu admitted he still couldn't believe what had happened, but Doyle cut him off and said he was only doing this for money, so save the embarrassing praise. Dong-gu kept going anyway, saying he never thought Doyle would crush Bae Cheol and Il-gyang's school like that. It all felt insane. He pointed at the photo Doyle had sent of Bae Cheol beaten down and asked if it had been edited. Doyle said faking the picture would have been easier than the fight itself. Dong-gu just smiled and said Doyle really was amazing. Then he brought up his next plan, promising he wouldn't drag Doyle down and that he'd be ready. What he meant was simple. He was going to learn how to fight. Meanwhile, at Seok Donghai, Seok Donghai, what Seok Kai, the number 5 was talking with his group about the rumor that Bae Cheol had lost. Some thought it was their chance to celebrate and move up, while others dismissed it as a fake story. Seok Kai didn't buy it either, saying Bae Cheol wasn't someone who'd go down that easily. Then he looked over at a boy named Dong Hyuk who was kneeling inside a marked circle with targets drawn on him and hurled a baseball at him when he didn't answer. Why say? Okay, Hein snapped, asking why he was ignoring him, then ordered him to go pick up the ball. After Dong Hyuk brought it back, he was told to get back in his place. A circle on the ground labeled reserved seat for retards. The group called Dong Hyuk pathetic, but Seo K-hyun corrected them, saying he wasn't pathetic, he was born a retard. Laughing, he said the only people Dong-gu could blame were his parents for giving birth to a failure, then asked if he agreed. He kept pushing, repeating the question about whether his parents had given birth to a retard. Dong-gu stayed silent in his spot, and that made Seo K-hyun blow up even more for not answering. In anger, he fired the baseball hard at Dong-gu, but Dong-gu barely dodged it in time. That shocked Dong-gu, who had returned with Doyle and noticed Doyle had caught the ball with ease. Doyle watched the whole thing from a distance. The gang spotted him and walked over, and Seo K-hyun demanded to know who he was and whether he came from Suman school. Before Doyle even answered, a baseball smashed into Seo K-hyun's face. The girl with the gang screamed, "Honey!" Then she yelled that Doyle was insane. Doyle stepped in, handed Dong-gu his food tray, and Dong-gu calmly asked if he wanted him to carry it. The moment the girl saw Doyle clearly, she was stunned by how handsome he was. Now the whole gang focused on Doyle and started moving toward him, curious about this good-looking stranger. One of them angrily asked if Suman school had lost its mind, and if Doyle was crazy too. He pointed at their uniforms and asked if Doyle even knew who they were. Doyle stayed calm, pulled a gun from inside his shirt and aimed it at him before firing at his head. The whole gang froze in shock. Then one of them screamed and charged Doyle, yelling about how he could even have a gun in Korea. Before he could finish, Doyle rushed him, tripped him, and slammed a hard strike into his neck. The guy collapsed, choking in Doyle's grip, and Doyle dragged another gang member into a wall, smashing his head against it. After that, Doyle started firing rubber bullets at him. The gang member screamed in pain, gasping that he couldn't breathe and calling Doyle a madman. Doyle shut him up with a rubber bullet to the head. The rest, terrified, kept shouting, asking who he was, how he dared bring a gun into Korea, and telling him to drop it. Doyle answered with one word, no. Then he blew on the barrel and told them to come at him all at once because they were annoying him. A burst of more shots echoed through the area. The Seokdong school gang kept panicking and shouting questions at Doyle. Seo Kyun couldn't understand where Doyle had come from or why he was attacking them, and started thinking all Gayong school had sent an assassin. As Doyle calmly walked toward him, Seo Kyun desperately blurted out that Bo Seo Gyun was the one who told him to catch BHL. Doyle ignored that and simply asked who he was. Seo Kyun snapped, demanding to know why Doyle was attacking them if he wasn't with Il Gayong. After a brief silence, Doyle told him to look down. The guy looked confused and asked what he meant, but Doyle just said, fake, and raised the gun to his face and shot him in the head with a rubber bullet, dropping him. From farther back, Dong-gu smiled and announced that Sikdong Hai was their next target. Right before he passed out, the attacker asked Doyle why he was doing all this. Doyle gave a one-word answer, pork. And with that, the move to wipe out Sikdong Hai began. 2 months later, on a warm day, Doyle was sitting in a park when Park Jin-gu, the former number 3 of Il-gyong school, walked up to him. Jin-gu called Doyle Hyung-nim, but Doyle told him to stop, pointing out that Jin-gu was already 20. Then Doyle asked how he had even managed to transfer into his school. Jin-gu insisted he had to be wherever Doyle was, and begged him to allow it. Doyle kept showing how annoyed he was by the title Hyung-nim. But Jin-gu said age didn't matter, the strongest man naturally became Hyung-nim. He went on to say that men are drawn to great leaders, and he used to think his old boss at Il-gyong was the highest peak. But after seeing that leader beaten in the hospital, he realized there was an even bigger mountain, Doyle. Doyle then wondered why Jin-gu hadn't been arrested. He had already texted the crooked officer to ask why Jin-gu was out. The officer answered that after a full investigation, Jingu was released with only a warning because they found no proof tying him to Il-gyong's crimes. He described Jingu as nothing more than a muscle-crazy freak they couldn't pin anything on. Jingu bowed to Doyle and swore to follow him like a big brother for the rest of his life. Doyle let out a tired sigh and told him to do whatever he wanted. Jingu gratefully accepted. At the park, Susie complained about how hot it suddenly got and how much she was sweating. From the bench, Doyle said he was wondering when she'd finally show up. Then Susie cheerfully asked who wanted to wipe her sweat. Jingu jumped at the chance, but Susie instantly decked him, called him a pervert, and told him to back off. Watching the chaos, Doyle wondered if he should just kill them all and leave Korea. That thought got cut off when Donggu stormed in. Mad that Doyle wasn't on time, Doyle calmly pointed out they still had 3 minutes, but Donggu kept whining, called him a liar, and said this training had nothing to do with real fighting. For the past 2 months, Donggu had only been doing lower body training to get ready for the next stage. He was annoyed because Doyle still hadn't taught him any actual moves. He also wasn't sure this training would really turn him into a good fighter. Checking the timer on his phone, Doyle coldly told him to shut up if he wanted to fall apart, then do it. Later in the school bathroom, Doyle finally told him the next mission: wipe out Seokdong High School. The bonus for pulling it off was 6 million won. From inside a stall, Donggu was stunned. He thought it'd only be 1 million won, then asked Doyle to wait because he couldn't focus right now. Doyle flatly refused and asked why he should plan around Donggu's bathroom timing. He went on to say Seokdong would be much tougher than Il-gyong. Donggu was almost moved, thinking Doyle had done research, but Doyle shut that down. His reason was simple: enemies who show up later are always stronger. Donggu thought that made no sense. Doyle added that having dead weight like Donggu would only make the job harder. He reminded him that he'd promised to train him to the edge over these 2 months. Now Doyle gave him a test, proved the training wasn't wasted. He had to show he wasn't just baggage. With the Judo Twins gone, Park Kang-wook was now the strongest student at Suman, so Doyle told Donggu to pick a fight with Kang-wook, beat him and take over the school. When Donggu asked if Doyle wasn't already the leader, Doyle mocked the idea, saying he was world-class, not some school boss. Doyle promised that if Donggu became the top dog at Suman, they could wipe out Seokdong in just a week. Word about Donggu challenging Park Kang-wook spread all over the school. The students were fired up, calling the whole thing insane. They rushed to the hall to see it for themselves. Soon a huge crowd packed around Park Kang-wook and Donggu in the middle. Kang-wook was furious, yelling that these idiots were messing with him again. Around them, students whispered in shock that Donggu was really standing up to Park Kang-wook. Elsewhere, a heavyset man was told that the one who beat Doyle came from Suman High School. He questioned whether that report was even true. His followers said witnesses claimed it, but every nearby camera recording had been erased, so it still felt like a rumor. Even so, he scoffed at it. Doyle was the real thing. He guessed the National Union might be behind Doyle's retirement, but the big man cut him off. There was no way fools from Suman took Doyle down. He declared that traitors dragging the 12 nations name through the dirt were popping up all over Seoul, in both the southwest and northwest. Then he went to a house and kicked the lock off the door. He said he was there to punish those rats before they spread further. Inside, he called out Park Sang-sik and branded him a rat. He accused him of using their leader's name to build his own business. Park Sang-sik panicked and screamed for his men to attack. Even surrounded, the big attacker stayed calm. He dropped one man with a punch, then smashed through the others. When another swung a stick at him, he slipped past it with ease. He grabbed the man's head and drove his knee straight into his face. Then he turned to another thug carrying a hammer and charged right into the rest. One brutal hit after another dropped them. With the hammer raised, the large man rushed straight at Park Sang-sik. Park Sang-sik froze in fear when he saw all his men already down, leaving him alone against that monster. Desperate, he swung a baseball bat and screamed for the man's death. The attacker dodged, then blasted him with the hammer and sent him crashing to the ground. When it was over, he stood there breathing hard among the bodies, wondering if this was what betraying other people's names was worth. Then he noticed a flyer on the floor. Kim Doyle of the Thunder Fist dominates South Seoul. He swore to crush that bastard. He was Jang Chun-sik, the number 2 of Seokdong High School. Back at Suman High School, students kept crowding into the hall, whispering to each other. Doyle sat quietly and watched Donggu fight Park Kang-wook. Kang-wook was breathing hard with rage, cursing the people who kept messing with him. Donggu was down, bloodied across his face and body, but he slowly started waking up. One student couldn't believe he was standing again. The beating continued, and Kang-wook was stunned that Donggu got back up after such a heavy punch. Even then, Donggu could barely stay steady. Kang-wook snapped and cursed him again. He shouted that Donggu should have stayed down. Then he came in hard again and slammed another punch into Donggu's face. Donggu tried to answer back, but Kang-wook dodged easily and mocked how slow he was. A heavy kick crashed into Donggu's side, and Kang-wook angrily asked why he kept standing up just to do useless things. Even in that pain, Donggu's eyes still showed grit. Kang-wook followed with a brutal kick to Donggu's face, dropping him flat onto the hall floor. One of Donggu's friends watched in worry and softly called his name. He remembered asking Donggu before if Doyle was teaching him to fight. Jidonggang had laughed and said yes, He was working this hard because he couldn't depend on Doyle forever. That answer had shocked his friend, who thought relying on Doyle was only natural. After all, everyone had their own place in life. Doyle was Doyle, and they were just themselves. Back in the hall, Dong-ga rose again, spit out blood, and stunned everyone watching. They couldn't believe he was still standing, and some wondered if he had broken bones. The students started asking if this was really the Dong-ga they knew, and why he kept forcing himself back up. Breathing hard, he raised his guard once more. Kang-wook stared at him in anger and confusion, noticing Dong-gu's body had stopped listening to him. Even so, that sharp stare never left his eyes. Kang-wook thought it was just like before. Dong-gu couldn't do anything alone without that transfer student. To him, Dong-gu had gone crazy after watching Doyle. He figured Dong-gu really believed this brave little act would change something. So he decided not to let him stand again, yelling that this time he'd knock him out for good. Kang-wook charged in for the finisher. Dong-gu stayed conscious through the hit and swung back, but Kang-wook slipped past the attack and fired off a hard kick that sent a tooth flying. Dong-gu dropped unconscious. His friends screamed his name in horror. Not far from the ring, Doyle watched the whole thing without saying a word. Kang-wook kept kicking Dong-gu again and again with no mercy. Standing over him, Park Kang-wook exploded, yelling that Dong-gu had no business trying to climb higher. He kept cursing and stomping him. As Park Kang-wook tried to catch his breath, he kept muttering insults at Dong-gu. He was furious that Dong-gu still didn't know his place. Then he turned from Dong-gu, faced the crowd, and challenged anyone else to come fight him. At that moment, Dong-gu's friend was lost in thought. He kept repeating to himself that Doyle is Doyle, and they are just them. Dong-gu had said he could never become like Doyle. BA was smiling. Kang-wook wondered if Dong-gu had finally gone crazy, because he was sure that last punch should have finished him. Dong-gu threw a hard counter, but Kang-wook barely dodged it. In that instant, Dong-gu remembered asking Doyle how he could beat Park Kang-wook. Doyle corrected him. The question wasn't how. He was going to beat him. Back in the fight, Dong-gu held his ground after the blow and grabbed Kang-wook's arm. Kang-wook was shaken by the look in his eyes and wondered if that was really the face of someone about to lose. Doyle's words came back to him. At this level, fights aren't decided by some huge physical gap, but by endurance and will. There wasn't a big size difference between him and Kang-wook, so the match would come down to toughness and stamina. And Doyle had said Dong-gu had spent 2 months building exactly those things, while Kang-wook prepared nothing. The plan worked. Dong-gu finally smashed a clean punch into Kang-wook's face. Doyle had told him that if he lasted 3 full minutes, Kang-wook wouldn't be able to keep up with his punches. And sure enough, Kang-wook started slowing down, even stumbling on his feet. Dong-gu's taunts had done their job, burning through Kang-wook's energy fast. Once Kang-wook was worn out, Dong-gu took his chance and blasted him down with a hard kick. In his head, Doyle's advice kept repeating. By the end, even standing would be hard for Kang-wook. Doyle had said that once Kang-wook's stamina ran dry, every breath would hurt like hell. And that's exactly what happened. Kang-wook turned into a punching bag. Dong-gu kept landing hit after hit, and Kang-wook couldn't answer back. At that moment, all the strength Dong-gu had built through brutal training and every bit of effort he gave was now being used to break Park Kang-wook. Doyle's words kept coming back. Raw strength alone doesn't always win big fights. What really matters is a strong will backed up by a strong body. With that in mind, Dong-gu poured on a storm of kicks and punches. Doyle's last advice rang in his head. When he felt ready to quit, he had to push for just one more. Dong-gu drew that willpower from painful memories, the days when he was bullied, beaten, and even used like a chair by Park Kang-wook and the others. Defiance filled Dong-gu's eyes as he swore he would never go back to that life. With that resolve, he stepped forward hard. Dong-gu realized he didn't need to become like Doyle. Being himself was enough. Everyone watching was stunned. Then Dong-gu drove one final blow into Kang-wook's head and ended the fight. Kang-wook dropped unconscious. Even his followers were shaken, collapsing at their leader's defeat. Dong-gu's friends ran over at once. They hoisted him onto their shoulders and cheered his win. Proudly they shouted, "Leader Ma, Dong-gu." Far away at a Blackhead branch in Russia, a woman sent out all the gathered intel through a secure app called Cox. Later, as Doyle and Dong-gu were leaving, Dong-gu noticed Doyle's new wireless earbuds. He asked where Doyle got them since his uncle's company hadn't released them yet, and also wanted to know who he was talking to. Dong-gu kept firing off questions, including where they were headed. Doyle calmly reminded him that he promised Sukdong's school would be gone within a week. At what looked like a pool hall, a Sukdong member was tormenting a student, forcing his tongue out and pressing a lit cigarette near his face. Then Doyle and Dong-gu walked in, and the noise stopped everything. The gang leaders stared at them, trying to figure out who they were. Doyle stayed calm and said he was there to keep his promise. What came next was a massacre. Gang members were left sprawled everywhere, blood all over, some tossed across the pool tables. The gang leader was terrified. Jung-soo, Sukdong High's number 4, panicked, wondering who this attacker was and how Sumin School had someone this strong. A quick glimpse showed Doyle crushing them with ease, while Jung-soo noticed how strange his fighting style was. Doyle walked up to Jung-soo and asked if he wanted to live or die. The question left Jung-soo frozen. Doyle told him to listen carefully if he wanted to live, because there were only 2 things he needed. First, he asked about the new gambling site aimed at kids. He ordered Jung-soo to hand over every piece of evidence and every name tied to it. Everything had to be sent through an app Doyle had just put on his phone. His second order was to go tell Wang Guokhui that he had a deadline to come to Suman's school and kneel. Then Doyle pointed to Dongui and made it clear their leader had to kneel before his leader and surrender, or there would be bloodshed. That completely confused Jung-soo, who started thinking this glasses-wearing kid was Suman's new boss. After all, anyone commanding a monster like Doyle had to be dangerous. Dongui immediately started to panic and tried to stop Doyle, sure that Wang Guokhui would never come just because they asked. Flustered, Dongui demanded to know what kind of Wang Guokhui this was, then blew up and called Doyle insane for saying something so crazy. Doyle calmly answered that it would lead to a gang war. That made Dongui even madder. He called Doyle a psychopath and shouted that gang wars don't happen anymore. Doyle laid out his logic simply. Every time he beats someone, someone stronger shows up. He was sick of it, so he'd just wipe out Sukdong's school in one shot. Dongui yelled that they'd die from sheer numbers alone, but Doyle told him not to worry about that. He turned back to Yong-soo and repeated the order to bring Wang Guokhui. Yong-soo started laughing oddly, and when Doyle threatened to kill him, he said he laughed because nobody ever asks to see their leader. Usually it's the other way around. Elsewhere, on a rainy night in Gimcheon, someone stood in the rain crying in total despair. Back in Gimcheon, a man watched the fight in horror, thinking the attacker moved like something not even human. That's when he realized the rumors were true. The attacker was the ghost. Seeing that speed, he decided to run for his life, but before he could, the attacker jumped him and finished him. It was clear this brutal fighter was tearing through his enemies without mercy. The remaining gang members rushed the ghost in one last desperate move. The ghost didn't care about their numbers and met them head-on, smiling darkly. Using a blade, he moved through them at terrifying speed and cut them down one after another without a hint of mercy. After wiping out the men around him, the ghost locked onto their leader as his next target. He charged straight at the gang leader and even smiled, thinking he'd landed the hit, but the man was unharmed. Young-soo told Doyle that the person he wanted was in Seoul, away on a revenge trip. The ghost was shocked to find the leader wasn't easy prey, and then a fatal-looking punch came at him with no way to dodge. The impact launched the ghost through the air. The leader followed up with a final blow, knocking the ghost out and sending his teeth flying. After that, one of his men told him to report the result right away. That leader was Wang Guokhui, head of Sukdong's school and one of the 12 nations. Somewhere else in a place that looked like a max security prison, Bae Jol sat in a wheelchair, proof of the lasting damage from his defeat, while a visitor waited for him. Elsewhere, Jang Chun-sik sat with Jung-soo, who showed him a flyer that read, Kim Doyle of the Thunder Fist rules South Seoul. He reported that Wai Seok-hyun's crew had been sent to the hospital, and also told him about the attack at the pool hall. Young-soo finished his report by saying the attacker was a follower of Sumun's new leader Ma Dong-gu. He also said Doyle had barged in demanding that their leader come kneel. To save face, Young-soo lied and claimed he just chewed Doyle out and sent him away. Jang Chun-sik exploded and ripped the flyer apart. Even though he said the world had gone crazy, he shocked them by ordering everyone to ignore it. When Young-soo questioned that choice, Chun-sik said Doyle was just a liar chasing fame by claiming he beat him. He compared Doyle to another man from the past who stained the name of the 12 nations, calling him another nobody desperate for attention. Chun-sik kept talking to Young-soo, saying nobody would believe Bae Ji-chol had been beaten by Doyle. To him, Doyle was only trying to stir them up, and using Dong-gu as a front felt like some old-school gangster act. He ended by saying people like that are bound to die out, mosquito trash, not even worth dealing with. Later on a rainy day, Doyle taught Dong-gu the basics of Blackhead's close-range combat. Still worried, Dong-gu asked if Doyle really believed Wang Guokhui would come to Sumin's school. Doyle simply said he'd beat him somehow. Dong-gu snapped, convinced Doyle had no idea how terrifying Guokhui really was or how far above everyone else he stood. He turned to Jin-gu for backup, and Jin-gu nervously said Guokhui had gone beyond human limits. Doyle cut him off coldly. He's still human. To make his point, Dong-gu brought up an old story. Back in middle school, he'd heard a rumor that Wang Guokhui beat a bear to death. He tied that rumor to something that happened 3 years earlier when a black bear escaped from Cheonggyeom Zoo and caused chaos all over the area before it was later found dead. According to the story, Guokhui was the one who killed it. Jin-gu begged Doyle to take this seriously, but Doyle ignored the warning completely. Right then, while Doyle was thinking about how much he still had to do and how there was no turning back, someone hidden nearby was listening. Then the scene returned to Doyle drinking juice and confidently saying Wang Guokhui would definitely come to Suman. Elsewhere, Young-soo was reporting to Jang Chun-sik again. He hesitantly admitted something felt off about Doyle. His movements reminded him of Hye Chae-hoo, and he thought the same about Ma Dong-gu, the leader Doyle worked under. Jang Jung-soo said they should wipe them out before they got any stronger, but Chun-sik laughed and asked if he meant Hye Chae-hoo from the National Union. He said if Doyle really matched that level, he would have died already. Hearing that, Jung-soo bitterly thought he almost had. Chun-sik told him to quit talking nonsense and go have a drink instead. Right after that, he started hitting on a girl from Cheonggyeol High School. He even offered to call Jung Hyun-woo and make school easier for her. Seeing that Jung-soo couldn't help thinking Chun-sik should worry about his own men first. Beside him, Jung Jung-soo was stuck in his own head. If he disobeyed Doyle, he was dead. But if he did what Doyle wanted and reported Suman, his whole gang would be dragged into a huge disgrace. No matter what he chose, his life was about to become hell. Then the man running the Yunpyeong-go workshop rushed in. Out of breath, he shouted that there was a major problem. He finally got the words out. The workshop had been hacked. Dong Chun-sik froze for a second, then asked if that was really true. That same rainy night, a message showed up on a giant screen. It was a direct threat. They had them. If they wanted the password, they had to come to Suman High School and meet Ma Dong-go the next day at 8 p.m. Somewhere else, one of Chun-sik's followers showed him his phone and confirmed that Ma Dong-go was the same kid from Suman School. Chun-sik was already on a call, clearly irritated. Then things got worse. The said Moon workshop had been robbed too. That sent him into a rage, and he crushed his phone in his hand. He repeated Ma Dong-go's name, then burst into a furious curse. Far from all that, Doyle kept walking through the rain like nothing was wrong. Then he suddenly stopped like he'd sensed someone. Back at the hacked workshop, Chun-sik asked what ransomware even was. He figured the problem would be easy if they just had the password, then yelled into the phone for the caller to explain it properly. By now, the pressure was clearly getting to him. Their heated talk stopped when someone important arrived. A follower quickly announced the boss had come, and everyone bowed at once. It was Wang Gokhui, the top leader. Jang Chun-sik stepped up and apologized for not welcoming him sooner. Gokhui sat down and coldly asked where Suman High School was. That caught Chun-sik off guard. Gokhui then mentioned a new kind of betting game going around in prison. The story cuts to a prison meeting room. There, Gokhui had visited Bae Ju Chul, who was now in a wheelchair. He said he came to talk money, but now he just felt let down. In his eyes, there was nothing left to discuss with a man stuck in a wheelchair. Bae Ju Chul warned that ending up like this only takes a moment. Then he added that a demon was living at Suman High School. After that visit, Wang Gokhui ordered Jang Chun-sik to gather every group under them and head for Suman High School. Elsewhere, the person who had been spying on Doyle and Dong-go walked down the street in the rain. He stepped in front of Doyle, called him commander, and said it had been a long time. Then Wang Gokhui declared that the Sukdong gang would move on Suman School the next day. Meanwhile, in Busan, the blackhead leader Do-sung was meeting with Doyle. Do-sung complained that Doyle made him come all the way to Busan when they could have met in Seoul, where his mother lives. He said he loved ports because there were land and sea routes meet, and to him that felt romantic. Then he warmly called Doyle his son and said he'd missed him. Do-sung went on, saying Doyle had been in Korea for a full year now, and had probably seen enough. He asked when Doyle planned to leave and even offered him a Korean face mask. Doyle shut him down, saying he'd already made it clear he was never going back. Do-sung let out a mocking laugh and asked if Doyle was still mad about his frozen bank account. He insisted that came from the finance team, not him. Doyle only asked if that was all. Then he got up to leave, saying he had somewhere to be. His father tried to keep him there for a meal, but Doyle walked off, making Do-sung mutter that handling his sons was harder than meeting the president. As Doyle left, his father shouted that he loved him. Once Doyle was gone, Do-sung called over one of his men, Ji Gui-yeon from Blackhead's special team. He told him to watch over Doyle. Do-sung complained that his son brought disaster wherever he went, brought up Japan, and admitted he couldn't control him. Still, he noticed Doyle seemed fine having Ji Gui-yeon around, so he ordered him to bring his son back. Ji Gui-yeon accepted the command with respect. Later, while Doyle walked down a hallway, Ji Gui-yeon caught up. Doyle shot him a cold look and asked if he had a death wish following him around. Back at Suman School, the field clock read 7:58 p.m. Dong-guek stared at his phone in full panic. He thought Doyle was insane for being so sure the Sukdong gang would actually come. Now he was scared the whole plan had fallen apart. So he texted Doyle asking where he was and why he still wasn't at school. Doyle answered that he was on the way. Even with that reply, Dong-guek kept thinking about what he'd do if Doyle never showed and bailed on everything. Elsewhere on the field, Jo Young-chul wondered why they were even there this late. Park Kang-wook said they came because of him, the kind of guy whose orders can't be ignored. And when Dong-guek asked so seriously, he felt he had no choice but to help. He still wasn't sure if that request was begging or blackmail. Jo Young-chul said they should leave, but Kang-wook wanted to wait and see. Nearby, Park Jin-guek was laughing like crazy, thrilled for the fight with Sukdong. He'd wanted ever since his military days. Around the field, the Suman students admired Park Jin-gu, and one of them pointed out how athletic he looked. Then the Suman High School cheer squad showed up. One girl told her friend Mina this felt more like a gang war, and wondered why a cheer squad was even needed. Mina answered that having a pretty girl cheering matters in any situation. Then she scanned the crowd, annoyed that Doyle wasn't there and that she had to look at everyone else instead. Meanwhile, Dong-ga kept staring at his phone, cursing Doyle for causing all this chaos and then vanishing. When the clock hit 7:59 p.m., one student said fighting Suk-dong made no sense, and they should run while they still could. That only made Dong-ga panic even more. He was shaking with fear. Meanwhile, at Yongdong Post Station, Doyle was walking with Gwi-yeon, who said he'd found a studio apartment near his home. Doyle snapped that if he wanted to die, he should just do it. Then he checked the time, 8:11 p.m., and realized he was seriously late. As he kept moving, someone purposely slammed into his shoulder. Back on the field, everyone kept wondering what was taking so long. It was already past 8. Dong-gok suddenly started laughing, partly from relief, because deep down he knew this never made sense. The others relaxed too, thinking Sukdong stayed away because Sumon's name was too nasty. The mood loosened up, and Mina even brought fried chicken for the fight that never happened. Soon the students were chatting and taking group photos. Park Kang-wook joked that he thought today was supposed to be about showing their power, then asked his friend for a cigarette. For a second, the mood tightened. When he repeated himself, his friend just stared toward the school gate in shock. A massive crowd was coming straight at them. The sight left Dongga and the others stunned and terrified. The invading group crossed the field without slowing down. Their leaders came into view. Jong Myung-hwan, head of Kangsae-ho High School under Sukdong. Jong Da-man, leader of Muncheon High School. Ba Yu-hwan, Sukdong's number 3, and Jang Chun-sik, their number 2. Then their leader Wang Guokhui stepped forward and roared, asking who the demon of Sumon was. At that same moment in the station, Yu Dong-suk blocked Doyle's path and greeted him with a smile. Guiyong watched and thought this had become a huge pain. At the station, Yu Ha-young, leader of the Nampo Orium group, spoke to Doyle. He said they might let someone off the first time, but never the second. Back at Sumon School by 8:24 p.m., the fight was already underway. Dongga got punched so hard his glasses flew off as he hit the ground. Off to the side, Wang Guokhui calmly sat and ate raw meat with drinks in hand. He watched as the Sumin students were chased down and beaten. Dongga ran in panic, yelling at them to stay away. Guokhui picked up another piece of meat and asked Jang Chun-sik if this runaway kid was really Sumin's leader. Chun-sik said the face seemed to match the one in the photo. Then he added that, judging by how he looked, Dongga seemed like nothing but a hanger-on trying to use someone else's name. Still, Ba Yu-hwan wasn't convinced. He wondered how some nobody could hit 2 of their shops in Yunpyeong and Seodemyeon. Chun-sik mocked him, asking if he really thought Dongga was someone important. Yu-swan said that wasn't what he meant. What bothered him was this: these idiots had the nerve to challenge Sukdong School, and none of it made sense. All around them, the students from Sumin kept getting crushed. Guokhui kept eating and said with total confidence that the demon was here, just like Bae Joel had told him before. In the middle of it all, Dongga remembered the first thing Doyle taught him in Blackhead Close Combat: control your emotions. The rule was simple: stay calm no matter what. But then one attacker pointed him out as the leader and told everyone to jump him. Donggu freaked out and ran, yelling that he wasn't the leader. He honestly wondered how anyone was supposed to stay calm when they were about to get beaten to death. Then the second lesson came back to him: build and save your stamina, use as little energy as possible. Donggu figured staying calm could wait. At least he'd trained hard for endurance, and he remembered all those brutal workouts. Even so, while running and getting hit, he realized that training wasn't enough, and started screaming in pain and panic. He understood that in a one-against-many fight, the other side starts with way more stamina than you. Then he slipped for a second, and one gang member blasted him in the face with a hard kick. The hit sent Donggu flying. He struggled back up, gasping and worn out. The attackers closed in around him and told him to accept what was coming. Broken and scared, Donggu shouted, asking what good endurance was against a crowd this big. Then rubber bullets suddenly tore through the chaos. A quick flashback shows Doyle handing someone a gun and asking for 2 million won in return. The buyer was shocked he'd give away something that valuable. The weapon turned out to be a 9mm Glock 24 loaded with special rubber rounds. Back on the field, the shooter was a big student named Cheng Su in a protective vest. He asked if Donggu was okay, and Donggu recognized him and called out his name. But before anything else, a Sukdong member kicked Donggu down again. The attackers sneered, asking who this pig was, and started beating him. Donggu got up screaming Cheng Su's name, while Cheng Su writhed under a rain of kicks. Donggu yelled that they were cowards for swarming people like this. One of them laughed and shot back. How could they call anyone cowards when their own side brought a gun? Right then, Donggu remembered Doyle's third lesson: stick to the basics. A gang member shouted that using a gun really was cowardly, but Donggu wasn't the one holding it. He charged, slipped past a punch, and fired back with a clean counter. The guy dropped to the ground. Donggu lit up with confidence when his well-practiced double punch worked. He told Cheng Su to hang on. They'd make those bastards pay. But that burst of hope didn't last. A Sukdong member kicked him from behind, cursed Ma Donggu, and told everyone to crush him. As blow after blow landed, Donggu remembered the fourth lesson: use your grudge and your willpower. He kept taking hit after hit. The Sumin students saw how bad it was. They were outnumbered 10-1. Zhao Yunxiol told Park Kang-wook they had to run. Zhao Yunxiol was already bolting and yelling for him to come too. After a brief pause, Park Kang-wook chased after him and told him to wait. Then Park Jin-gu jumped in and showed his insane strength, dropping 30 Sukdong members by himself. Ba Yu-hwan watched and admitted Park Jin-gu was strong, just like you'd expect from Ulgaring's former number 3. Still, he dismissed the rest of Suman as useless. At the same time, Jang Chun-sik shouted for his men to move and herd the others into the middle of the field to finish them off. It was 8:42 p.m. now, and Ba Yu-hwan still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. How had these school punks hit their workshops, and how did they even force Wang Guokhui to show up himself? By then, the Suman students were completely drained. Park Jin-gu wondered if this was Sukdong School's famous hunting style. On the field, Jang Chun-sik barked at his gang, asking why they were still standing around, then ordered them to end it now. The attackers rushed the terrified Summon students. Meanwhile, one cheerleader told Minima this wasn't the time to keep eating fried chicken. The others said they should at least call the police, but Minima mocked the Summon students as losers, then realized her phone was gone. Suddenly, Jang Do-mina stepped in front of them and roughly asked what the two pretty girls were doing here. Elsewhere, Park Kang-wook and his friend were sprinting down the street, and his friend told him to hurry. Park Kang-wook stopped, breathing hard, and said he had to go back. Jo Yoon-chul stared at him like he was insane, asking if he'd lost his phone, and telling him to search for it tomorrow instead. But Park Chang-gu-rup remembered the promise he made to Dong-gu. He told his friend that he was Park Chang-gu, the guy who's always suffering so pain didn't scare him anymore. Jo Yoon-chul could only stare, totally confused by that logic. Back at school, the cheerleaders were being carried off over Jang Do-man's shoulder, humiliated and silently swearing revenge. In an alley, Dong-gu was getting beaten badly and dragged along by a gang member. He collapsed in despair, thinking all that blackhead training was useless, and cursed Doyle as a fraud. Later, back on the field, Dong-gu was on his knees with a gag in his mouth and his hands tied, lined up with the other defeated students. Park Jin-gu lay nearby, unconscious and bleeding, while Wang Guokhui sat on a bench repeating that the devil really did live here. Then he dismissed the whole idea of Doyle being real as nonsense, and wondered why Bae Jewel had lied to him. Jang Chun-sik asked Guokhui what they should do with the captives. Guokhui told them to start the punishment. The first student would lose an eye, and the next would have both ears torn off. For Chang-su, he ordered a leg crushed so he could be used as a seat. And for Ma Dong-gu, who fought back to the very end, he gave a simple order: kill him. Guokhui then explained the cover story to Jing Myung-hwan. They'd frame it as a fight between Kang Se-ho and Suman where one troublemaker sadly died. He asked if the story worked, and Myung-hwan said yes. Myung-hwan promised to gather students with records and clean everything up without trouble. Guokhui laughed coldly as the prisoners shook in fear. Jang Chun-sik sneered at one student and asked if he finally understood his mistake. The student broke down, screaming and begging them to forgive him this one time. Guokhui ignored him, looked over at the tied-up Dong-gu, said he had fought to the end, and asked if he really was their leader. Then Wang Guokhui ordered that same captive student to kill Dong-gu himself. He tossed him a knife and said his punishment would be cancelled if he did it. The student froze, remembering Guokhui's order to gouge out one of his eyes. While Jang Chun-sik and another thug watched with mocking smiles, the student reached out with a shaking hand and took the knife. Then he slowly walked toward the bound Dong-gu, as Chang-su watched in tears, helpless to stop it. Standing in front of Dong-gu, the student cried and blamed him, asking why he'd done something so stupid, and what weak people like them ever thought they could change. Through sobs, he said losers like them were never going to win in the first place. Dong-gu flashed back to the years when he got bullied everywhere, all the time, while the student said enduring pain was the one thing they were good at, and they should have kept suffering in silence. Back in the present, two Sukdong members mocked his breakdown, saying this was getting boring. The student kept yelling at Dong-gu, asking what right they ever had to try to save anyone else. Jang Chun-sik finally lost patience, hit him and ordered him to quit crying and stabbed Dong-gu now, warning that he'd die too if he refused. With both hands shaking, the student gripped the knife under that pressure. The gang members screamed for him to hurry, and at last he let out a huge scream. Then a gunshot cracked through the air. Nearby, the cheer squad girls were tied up and gagged in an alley. On the field, Dong-gu looked up in shock, thinking Kim Do-hil had arrived. But it was Park Kang-wook, standing in the rain and ordering Suk-dong to stop. Kang-wook blamed himself for coming back and called himself crazy. He felt like everything since Il-gyong fell had stopped feeling real. He remembered Do-il asking for his help, and how he'd wondered why he should help an enemy at all. But Do-il reminded him that he was from Summon High School too. Kang-wook admitted he might really have lost his mind for falling for words like that. Then he shouted at Suk-dong to get out of their school right now. Jang Chun-sik mocked him, asking why he was telling them to leave when Summon was the one that invited them. Then Jang Chun-sik moved in a flash, knife in hand, aiming straight for Kang Do-bluk. Kang Do-bluk instantly realized this wouldn't be easy. Jang Chun-sik shoved a knife at the student and told him to finish Dong-gu fast or end up just like him. Park Kang Do-bluk was already hurt and coughing hard while the Suk-dong guys screamed for the student to stab Dong-gu. The student kept thinking about those earlier words, "It's our turn now," and saw them as total nonsense. To him, people like them were never meant to have a turn. Then he broke down and shouted that it was never going to be their turn in the first place. Right then, Chang-su yelled at Sang-chul, begging him not to stab Dong-gu. Sang-chul froze for a second and Dong-gu shut his eyes, ready for the end. Then a blinding light hit the field, and a motorcycle tore through a group of Suk-dong members, launching them into the air. Doyle had finally shown up. He stepped through the rain without a hint of fear, while gang members closed in from both sides, and the tied-up cheerleaders stared in shock. Doyle asked GWI-yeon how many enemies there were, and he answered 87. After that, Doyle asked for his help, and GWI-yeon agreed right away. Dong Young-hwan had no idea who this guy was, and charged straight at him. He never made it there. Doyle dropped him with a flurry of punches, then kept moving forward with GWI-yeon like none of this was a big deal. Sang Chai looked at Doyle as tears filled his eyes. For a brief second, the whole moment hit him hard. Then Sang Chai started crying in relief. Doyle walked over to him. He told him to stand up and said it was their turn now. Earlier at the train station, the speaker had announced a train leaving for Busan. Ju Ha-young told Doyle he might let an enemy slide once but not twice. Seeing Doyle again, he called it fate. Then Ju Ha-young invited him out for a drink. Yoo Jung-suk noticed Doyle seemed rushed. Ha-young handed him a key. He said the place was right in front of the station's first exit. Then he left, saying they'd definitely get that drink next time. Once he was gone, Yoo Jung-suk asked Ju Ha-young why he kept helping that kid. Back on the field, Doyle and Gi-hein were tearing through Suk-dong like it was nothing. Dong-gu could only stare. He had no clue who Doyle's helper was, but the two of them had already taken down more than 70 people in no time. Off to the side, Mina had somehow gotten free and was calmly eating fried chicken while cheering for Doyle, leaving Dong-gu wondering who untied her. On the Suman field, a student ran up to Park Kang-wook and asked if he was okay. Kang-wook said he was fine, joked that he was still the forever pummeled Kang-wook and asked what other reason he'd have for showing up. Then he showed the padding strapped around his stomach and said he came prepared. The student was glad he was safe, even if the nickname still made no sense. Nearby, Park Jin-gu was sprawled on the ground, bloody and passed out, hoping no one forgot about him. Chang-soo wondered if they were really supposed to just sit there and watch. He pointed out that Seo Mina was in the back eating fried chicken, and somehow she was the only one who hadn't been badly hurt. He remembered Doyle coming over, apologizing for being late, then telling the injured students to move back and rest so they wouldn't get in his way. Dong-gu admitted they were too badly injured to jump in anyway. Then something else caught his eye. Wang Guokhui didn't care at all that his men were losing. If anything, he looked like he was enjoying it. All at once, Jung Chun-sik burst out laughing like a madman. He walked toward Doyle and mocked Suman School for hiding its secret weapon. Now, he said, everything made sense. Trash students like them would never have challenged him for no reason. To Chun-sik, Doyle was the real opponent he'd been waiting for. Then he realized why Doyle looked familiar. He was that lying bastard who beat Bai Ji-chul. Chung Chun-sik pulled out a flyer with Doyle's picture and the name Thunderfist, proving he was the wanted guy. Guokhui laughed at the nickname and called it childish. He admitted Doyle had some skill but still looked down on him. For someone who supposedly forced one of the 12 leaders into retirement, Guokhui said Doyle didn't seem that special. Then the story shifted to Jang Chun-sik's past. Before Bai Ji-chul united Ilgyang School, Chun-sik had almost done it first. People started calling him a loser after what happened with Ji-chul, but he still took over Southwest Seoul and earned a name people feared. What made him so scary was how cruel he was. He was known for savage threats, even cutting off fingers to break people. Back in the present, Park Jin-ga forced himself up and warned Doyle that Jang Chun-sik was the kind of monster who'd do anything to win. But before Chun-sik could even make his move, Doyle tagged him with a fast, exact strike. Chun-sik just stood there, stunned. Then he figured it out. Doyle had nailed the fainting point in his hand. He couldn't believe someone could spot and hit that in the middle of a fight. Telling himself it was impossible, he tried to stay calm and not get fooled by this fraud. Chun-sik decided Doyle was just playing dirty mind games, but he figured he could play that game too. So he acted like he'd lost it and charged, screaming that he'd kill him. He came in with a kick, but Doyle slipped past it with ease. That was exactly what Chun-sik wanted. He was pretending to be some idiot fighting on pure rage. His plan was to make Doyle think he'd fallen apart and was attacking wildly. In truth, he was watching closely and setting up his finishing blow. As he kept aiming at Doyle's upper body, he was sure Doyle would let his guard drop. Then Chun-sik threw a bait punch to make Doyle dip low, smiling because he thought the fight was over. Park Jin-ga recognized it at once. It was Jang Chun-sik's special move, the face-crushing knee kick. But what happened next left Chun-sik stunned. Doyle fired back with a quick uppercut. Chun-sik couldn't understand it. He had attacked first. Before he could even think, Doyle hammered him with a brutal string of punches. Chun-sik still had no idea what was going on. Doyle's position and timing shouldn't have allowed that counter at all. Chun-sik had used a move he thought no one could beat, and Doyle still shut it down. That's when he realized in horror that Doyle was way ahead of him. Fear crept in, and Chun-sik tried to force it down by throwing one more desperate punch. Then he saw Doyle's next hit coming. He saw it clearly, but his body wouldn't move. He couldn't dodge. Doyle's fighting made no sense, and Chun-sik started wondering what kind of monster he was facing. At last, he believed Doyle really was the one who defeated Bae Jalchu. In the next instant, Doyle threw the finishing punch. Jang Chun-sik hit the ground and blacked out. When the fight was over, Wang Guokhui looked at Doyle and understood this was the demon of Suman. Doyle turned to face him, ice cold. He said he hadn't realized Guokhui was here too. Then, in the middle of that stare down, Wang Guokhui grabbed the motorcycle Doyle came on and hurled it at him with insane power. Doyle barely got out of the way before the bike smashed apart on the ground. Guokhui stood there flexing. The Suman students were speechless. One could barely believe Guokhui had really thrown a motorcycle, and the others started thinking the rumor was true that he'd killed a bear. Was this guy even human? Meanwhile, Park Jin-ga told Dong-ga that Doyle was in for a hard fight. He warned him not to underestimate Guokhui either. Then Jia Woo-young got blindsided by a sudden attack from Ba Yu-hwan, Suk-dong's number 3. Park Jin-ga explained that Yu Huan had actually been number 2 at Sukdong before Jang Chun-sik showed up. He said that in pure fighting skill, Yu Huan was several levels above Chun-sik. That shocked Dong-go, who asked why he was only number 3. The reason was simple. Chun-sik was better at making money for the gang. Because of that, Yu Huan got pushed down in rank. Park Jong-go went on, revealing that Bai Yu Huan's father was Bae Sok-go, the first champion of the OFC. So Yu Huan was born with a fighter's blood and was a natural genius. Back in the fight, Yu Huan mocked GW Yun for just standing there and asked if he didn't know how to attack or just couldn't find an opening. Doyle answered for him, telling GW Yun not to kill the guy. GW Yun said he was only judging how much strength to use. It had been a long time since he fought without trying to kill. Yu Huan laughed and brushed it off as empty talk. He said even fighting to kill wouldn't be enough for GWI Yang to win. Then the two finally clashed. Yu Huan came at him hard, but GWI Yang dodged every hit like it was easy. That left Yu Huan stunned. How was this guy avoiding everything so casually? GWI Yang wasn't only dodging. He was reading Yu Huan's patterns and predicting his moves. Yu Huan got angry, wondering how long this arrogant jerk planned to keep acting superior. Then GWI Yang suddenly struck and pointed out that Yu Huan's movements were too big. A split second later, he countered so fast that Yu Huan got hit clean and was left wondering when he'd even moved. GWI Yang kept the pressure on and slammed Bai Yu Huan to the ground with a heavy punch, wiping blood from his face. GWI Yang admitted Yu Huan's aim was sharp and impressive. GWI Yang looked down on him and said this was nothing. If it were a real fight, Yu Huan would already be dead. That sent Yu Huan into a blind rage. He flashed back to his father, calling him a useless brat. To him, GWI Yang was acting way too cocky after landing just one hit. So he charged in, yelling threats as he came. Watching closely, Dong-go realized Yu Huan was insanely fast. Even so, GWI Yang slipped past the attack with ease. That only made Yu Huan madder. He cursed him out and swore he'd see how long he could keep dodging. Park Jung-go was stunned by how fast GWI Yang was. He recalled Zhongchan once warning him never to fight that man. Still, Jung-go grew tense as he watched. GWI Yang was avoiding the attacks by a hair, and the fight was brutal. He felt Yu Huan might catch him at any second. But from GWI Yu Huan's side, dodging Yu Huan's non-stop attacks was simple. Then GWI Yu Huan suddenly fired back with a hard punch. Yu Huan cried out in pain. GWI Yu Huan noticed he'd hit a vital spot by reflex. That worried him. He didn't actually want Yu Huan to die, so he moved to finish it fast and asked which Yu Huan wanted broken, an arm or a leg. Those words brought back ugly memories for Yu Huan as he writhed in pain. He remembered his father mocking him, asking why he hadn't inherited everything and why he was still beneath him. Inside, Yu Huan rejected every word and told himself his idiot father was wrong. Fueled by anger, he shouted that he was the superior one. Everything he'd done, every fight was to prove it. In his mind, he was the strongest predator, the one everyone feared. Then he came at GWI Yu Huan with savage force, furious that he was being looked down on. Dong-gu saw Yu Huan get even faster. As he attacked, Yu Huan yelled that GWI Yu Huan couldn't treat him lightly. Then GWI Yu Huan snapped out a quick punch that landed clean on Bai Yu Huan. Yu Huan reeled, shocked, thinking it looked like teleporting. A second later, he recognized it as an advanced close-range technique from the Black Head organization. It was called the gun. For the first time, Yu Huan felt like he was facing a giant beast. Now he was the prey. Shock spread across his face as GWI Yu Huan slammed another heavy hit into him, leaving Dong-gu and the others completely stunned. GWI Yu Huan didn't stop there. He followed with a fast, scattered 4-hit combo. Dong-gu could only stare. He couldn't believe someone as strong as Yu Huan got taken down that easily and that fast. Yu Huan dropped to the ground, blood pouring from his head. GWI Yu Huan stood over him with a cold stare. Elsewhere, Jeonjung-su Sukdong School's number 4 finally let out a breath. He was stuck in a nightmare after being caught by a madman, and now everything had turned chaotic. In his hands was the member list. He had been forced to give up. At the Gimcheon Juvenile Detention Center, Seung-kun, the leader of Jongkun High School, got a hostile visit from Bae. Seung-kun couldn't understand how Bae, who could barely walk, still hit that hard. Bae said he'd heard about Kwan's attack on Sumin School. Seung-kun said he'd only heard a little in the visiting room. But once Bae realized that was all he knew, he suddenly stabbed him in the neck. Bae knew this was exactly how the protagonist operated, so he was sure MC was behind all of this. Somewhere else, two men were talking about the same thing. One told Wan, the number 2 man in the National Union's 3rd team, that Kwan was attacking Sumin School. Wan added that a strong rumor said someone at Sumin was the one who forced Bae into retirement. The other man thought it was only a rumor, but said if he was serious, Sumin had no chance. There just weren't many monsters on the protagonist level. Back at Sumin, Doyle kept pressing MC with fierce attacks. Kwan didn't even try to dodge. He just tanked the hits with raw toughness, leaving Dong-gu wondering what kind of monster he was. He kept throwing dangerous non-stop blows at Doyle, but Doyle avoided them cleanly. Doyle even grabbed a bench and used it as a weapon against the protagonist. Watching all this, Dongyu was amazed that MC could take such brutal hits, and on top of that, his destructive power was insane. Dongyu realized Kwon was on a totally different level. Elsewhere, a National Union member told Won what he knew about him. He said he didn't know much about BAE because that was another team's area, but he swore he'd seen the protagonist himself beat a bear to death. Back to the fight. Doyle was still taking Kwon's blows. Chang-Soo feared that even blocking punches from this monster could shatter Doyle's arm. Even so, Doyle never backed off, and MC rushed him with another crushing hit. Doyle slipped around it neatly. After that, they traded punches at blinding speed. Doyle was moving unbelievably fast. Dongyu couldn't get over it. How could someone as huge as Kwon be this fast too? To him, he felt like a broken game character. One said maybe the bear story was true, though. With monsters like the other men around, it didn't sound impossible. But the other guy corrected him. This was different. The protagonist was just a psychopath. Wee Wun started explaining the gap between BAE and Kwon. BA was a fearless psycho, but MC was worse. A madman who goes berserk the moment he feels fear. Then Gui Wun told the story of him and the bear. He said the protagonist wasn't fighting to survive. To him, it was more like a game. He was born with a body far beyond normal human limits, and had never felt fear once in his life, so he desperately wanted to experience it. Gui Wun called that reverse fear. He ended by saying that standing in front of Kwon was like facing despair itself. Terror showed on Gui, Dongguan, Mana's faces, but in the middle of the fight, with blood running down his face, Doyle started to smile. Back in his cell, BAE laughed to himself and wondered if MC had finally run into Doyle. In an instant, Doyle flashed forward, struck Kwon and sliced off his ear. He grabbed his head and screamed in pain and fury. In prison, BAE stood there bloodied, wearing a chilling smile as he wondered if the protagonist was finally feeling it. Doyle answered MC's scream by telling him to shut up, reminding him that it was Then BAE thought back to that strange feeling he had during his own fight with Doyle. At the same time, Kwon's face twisted with pure rage. The scene then cuts to a police station, where Jung-soo sat across from Officer Chung-sik. The officer confirmed Jung-soo had been running an illegal gambling site and was now turning himself in, and Jung-soo said yes. Then the officer asked why he suddenly surrendered. This wasn't his first crime, so what was the trick this time? Jung-soo hesitated. The officer warned him, did he really think he could betray Kwon and walk away? Police protection would only go so far, and Jung-soo knew it. The narration then talks about how humans rose to the top of the living pyramid. It says they got there because of intelligence, the thing that let them form groups and use tools. Without that intelligence, humans would stand in a very different place. Even a strong human becomes strong through repeated training, and that also takes intelligence. But then comes the question, what if someone were born with power beyond human limits? That would mean a monster had been born. That was Kwon's life. In the past, he could do 100 pull-ups while weighing over 100 kilos without even looking tired. From birth, his physical ability was far beyond any normal person. In another flashback, a teacher couldn't believe the story that a student had killed a bear alone, and people began calling him a monster. That's how he became known as the monster, Kwon. Only a handful in the country could even compare to him. Back at Sumin, the protagonist's severed ear lay on the ground. The narration says this monster had now met something even greater. Blood ran down MC's head as he asked Doyle who he was, pointing out that he was fighting bare-handed. Doyle casually moved like he was cleaning his ear. Watching from the side, Dongguo was stunned, wondering if Doyle had just ripped his ear off. Then he corrected himself. It looked more like a clean slice. BAE remarked that even Kwon probably couldn't handle Doyle. Meanwhile, the protagonist was in disbelief, wondering what trick Doyle had used and how something this impossible happened. Then MC suddenly attacked while Doyle was still talking. Doyle dodged it without trouble. Their brutal fight kept going. Kwon's rage exploded and he unleashed a storm of fast punches at Doyle. But Doyle kept weaving around them with quick, sharp movement. Dong realized he couldn't even follow him with his eyes. Even then, Doyle still managed to block one of the protagonist's crushing punches, and the exchange kept going at crazy speed. Guiyang watched in amazement. He could tell Kwon was a top-tier fighter fit for field missions, and he couldn't understand how someone like that was still stuck in Korea's high school scene. Then Doyle fired back with a heavy punch that landed square on MC. He screamed as the blow hit with brutal force. But Guiyang also understood one more thing. The protagonist's opponent was Doyle. The scene shifts back to the police station. At the station, an officer questioned Janongao-soo. He summed up Janonggao's wild claim. Someone sent him a video of himself killing a man, threatened to do the same to him, and forced him to turn himself in. The officer asked where the video was. Earlier, Janonggaosu had screamed when his computer suddenly blew up. Now he told the officer the PC exploded by itself, and the officer mocked him, asking if he was drunk. Jung-soo swore he was serious, and said the video was more than some normal murder clip. Back at the fight, Kwakwi stared at Doyle in shock, wondering how someone like him could even be human. To him, this was getting interesting. Doyle already guessed Kwakwi would try another sneak attack mid-conversation. Kwakwi charged with everything he had, saying he'd been waiting for someone like him. He swung hard, but Doyle slipped past it again. Watching from the side, Jingu was stunned. Kwakwi had finally caught Doyle. Doyle didn't panic. He moved at once and fired a strike at Guakwe. Seeing that, Guakwe feared Doyle was about to slice off another part of his body. He hurled Doyle away and quickly backed off. But Doyle landed right in front of him and called him a scared cat. Guakwe froze at the insult. Him, a coward? Then Doyle hit him again. Inside, Guakwe kept fighting the truth. He refused to admit he was scared. Jingu watched in confusion, wondering if that last hit had messed him up. Still, Guakwe roared that it was impossible for him to feel fear. Doyle only looked at him and said he was getting annoying. Then he chose an advanced move from the blackhead fighting style, the double burst. At the same time, back at the station, Jung-soo revealed something shocking. He told the officer the man killed in Doyle's video wasn't just anybody. He was a Colombian presidential candidate who vanished 2 years earlier. Back on the field, Doyle's attack wrecked Guakwe. In his mind, Guakwe fell into total darkness, then looked up and saw something huge coming down at him. It was like a giant finger crashing from above, and Guakwe knew he couldn't stop it. His defeat was certain, and everyone watching, including Jean, Mina, and Jingu, was left speechless. Doyle stepped up and stood over Guakwe's fallen body. In prison, BAE asked Guakwe if Doyle had really been that impressive. Somewhere else, Ho could barely believe what he'd just seen, and asked if he saw it right. At Summer and Field, Donggu exploded with joy and yelled that they had won. Doyle shut that down right away. He said he won, not them. Guakwe and his men were sprawled across the ground, completely beaten. Kang-wook cursed under his breath, but admitted those little punks had actually pulled it off. The Suman students broke into celebration. They crowded around Doyle and lifted him onto their shoulders while Mina shouted for them to back off because he was hers. Away from all the cheering, Sang-chul, the student forced to carry the knife, sat alone in the rain. Doyle was up on Jingu's shoulders while everyone cheered, saying the second half of school life had started and now it was their turn. Sang-chul stayed by himself, crying quietly. Far away, Ho was still in shock, wondering if what he heard could possibly be real. Then on a bright summer day, the story spread everywhere. Suman High School, just an ordinary school, had beaten Sukdong High, one of Seoul's 3 worst troublemaker schools. It felt like a miracle. Headlines started popping up fast, announcing Sukdong's fall and claiming justice had won. Elsewhere, a member of the Raging Riders gang read the news and couldn't believe it. A second later, he burst into crazy laughter, thinking the whole thing was hilarious. Meanwhile, Ho talked it over with someone else, who confirmed the news was really about Suman High. Ho said their leader was Donggu. The man said Donggu must be something special if he beat the great Wang Guakhui. He suggested making friends with him, and Ho agreed. And Ho ordered them to bring Donggu over nicely and try to recruit him. That man was Yu, one of the National Union's 3 pillars, and word of Suman's win was spreading fast. But for one person, that day never stopped hurting. Sang Chae-ol sat on a rooftop with Donggu, thinking he couldn't act like nothing happened or go back to normal after what he'd done. He was eaten up by guilt and said he couldn't carry it much longer. Even so, he thanked Donggu for still being kind to him. Looking at a phone photo labeled "Our Time at Suman," he promised himself he'd treasure that memory. After that, Sang Chae-ol's friend transferred schools. Later, in the anime club room, Donggu was shouting at Jingu and the others. He asked why they kept hanging around the club when they didn't even watch anime. It seemed they came because Sang Chae-ol's friend was gone. Jingu coldly asked Doyle who he should kill first. At the same time, Mina complained about the heat. Donggu snapped, saying the AC was already set to 18 degrees, and reminded her to wear the official uniform during indoor club time. He was even more shocked to see Kang-wook there, but Kang-wook said they were the ones who asked for his help in the first place. Donggu suggested taking a group photo while Donggu yelled at him to stop coming to school in just his underwear. They took the picture, and little by little, their strange family kept growing. Suman itself was changing. Some students thanked Donggu and said the school was way better now, but he humbly said he hadn't done anything. Doyle cut in and said that part was true, he'd done everything. Then he demanded 30,000 won from everyone for protection, and Donggu screamed at him to get lost. Things really were changing. The anime club started planning a summer trip to Japan to watch a movie. Sitting nearby, Doyle called the idea stupid. One student stared at him, wondering why he was picking a fight again. Doyle ignored that, and declared they were all going to Jeju Island for a month instead. The class protested, asking who gave him the right to decide. He coldly answered that he'd do whatever he wanted, which only made his logic sound even more absurd. Doyle then told the class that no matter what, everyone had to get ready. Once summer vacation started, they would begin a special project. Doyle was revealed to be the training leader, and Jime the instructor. The project was called Weakling Rehabilitation Project, Hell Training. Donggu protested, asking how Doyle could make the calls, when Donggu was supposed to be the leader, but Doyle gave the same cold answer. He'd do as he pleased. And just like that, summer vacation began. On Jeju Island, Mina and her friend were thrilled to be staying there for a whole month. Her friend suggested a new photo app that makes you look like a celebrity, and Mina got excited right away, ready to take fancy pictures. Mina joked and asked if anyone wanted to oil up her body. Doyle, close by, offered to do it for 100,000 won per body part. Mina got annoyed by the crazy price, while Donggu yelled, wondering why everyone had followed him there. Meanwhile, hell training had already started, and Jin was shouting for the students to move faster and asking if they planned to kill someone or not. He even warned that anyone who tried to run away would die. Some students had skipped training by saying their parents didn't allow it, and Donggu wished he'd use the same excuse. Jin kept putting Kang Wook through hell and mocked him for being painfully slow. Kang Wook complained that Jin had hit his solar plexus so hard he couldn't breathe, but Jin just told him to get up. Kang Wook screamed, asking why they'd ever need to kill someone. After a brutal month of training, everything was different. Jin still shouted the same question: were they going to kill someone or not? This time the students answered together, yelling, "Yes, we'll kill." Mina and her friend watched from the side. Her friend said it was scary how much people could change in 1 month, like they'd been fully brainwashed. Mina didn't care. She just wanted to know where Doyle was. Nearby, Donggu screamed and begged them to send him to North Korea instead. Mina watched in disgust, saying this kind of nonsense first thing in the morning made her want to scream. In Jeju's Yeondong area, several gang members lay dead across an office floor, surrounded by blood. Inside, Doyle sat with the terrified gang boss. He ate raw fish, complained he wasn't good with it, and said he'd rather have pork. Still, he said he'd eat it since the boss had prepared it for him. The man despaired inside, knowing the food had been meant for himself before Doyle suddenly showed up. In the Yeondong gang's office, its leader Han-il nervously asked Doyle why he came. Doyle told him to stop being so formal. That only scared Han-il more. He remembered losing several gold teeth because of Doyle before, and Doyle had even wondered then if he should just kill him. Doyle kept talking in that cold tone, asking what Han-il had been up to lately, and mocking him by asking if he was still kidnapping kids. Han-il quickly denied it, and said he was trying to live honestly now. Doyle didn't buy it. He flat out said Han-il was lying, and revealed he already knew about the secret illegal fighting ring. Han-il froze, wondering how much Doyle really knew. He tried to brush it off, calling it a small game between them. Doyle said it looked pretty big for a small game, then complained the fish tasted too fishy now so he couldn't eat anymore. Han-il was quietly irritated, since Doyle had already finished it all. Then Doyle laid out the rules: 10 fighters, a ring 5 meters high, and the last one standing wins, with no rules or weight classes. He called it insanely extreme and kept eating, which only made Han-il more annoyed. Han-il quickly tried to defend it, saying they planned to change the rules little by little and make it safer. Doyle cut him off and said the no rules part was great. Real fights don't have rules anyway. A quick flash showed the Suman students going through brutal training, shouting in unison, "Kill, kill." Right after that, Doyle told Han-il to put in 3 of his own fighters. He also ordered him to get their best 7 ready to face them. The narration then explained, Jeju Island's illegal ring, Death 10. It only had 2 rules. First, 10 fighters enter and they keep fighting until 1 is left. Second, the ring is 5 meters high. If someone falls, the organizers take no blame and that fighter is out right away. Other than that, anything goes. Biting, hits to the back of the head, even scratching. In a place this savage, Kang Wook could only stare in despair and wonder why he was back here again. Suzy and her friend sat in the stands, shocked a place like this existed in South Korea. They were impressed by how huge it was, but annoyed their phones had been taken so they couldn't post on Instagram. Donggu stood in the ring, clearly nervous and tense. From the VIP room above, Han-il bragged a little about how fancy the place was. Doyle shot back with sarcasm, asking if all this came from kidnapping rich kids. Han-il nervously denied it and said investors paid for everything. Doyle reminded him to stop being so formal, then asked which fighters mattered, since he had told him to bring out the best. Han-il hesitated and said their champion had been in an accident so he was at school for the time being. Still, Han-il assured Doyle they were fully prepared and wouldn't disappoint him. Doyle told him to keep going while casually taking Han-il's coffee and drinking it, which secretly bothered Han-il. He started the introductions with fighter number 1, Han Hyo-dae. In the stands, the girls said he was handsome, though Suzy thought he looked a little cheesy. Han-il explained that Hyo-dae was the current top fighter, a former Death 10 world champion, and from Busan. Doyle asked if Han-il had heard of the 12 nations. Han-il said only here and there, so Doyle noted they must be famous if even he knew them. Han-il gave a nervous laugh and said they were the future rulers of Korea's underworld. He added that when he was Doyle's age, he had wanted that title too. Doyle coldly said he understood, which made Han-il even more uneasy. Han-il went on, saying, Han Hyo-dae belonged to the 12 nations and was a high-level fighter under Ju Ha-yong, the leader of Nampo Orium. He added that even pro fighters feared Ju Ha-yong, and Han Hyo-dae being one of his close men proved how skilled he was. That made Doyle think back to the strange man he had met before, Ju Ha-yong. Han-il moved to the next one, fighter number 3, Yu Hai-cheol, a Jeju native. He revealed that Hai-cheol's father led the Harabong gang. Han-il said he and the man were like brothers, so Han-cheol was almost like a nephew to him. He added that the kid's basics were solid because he was raised in that world and groomed from birth. Last, he introduced fighter number 7, Cha In-beom, calling him a rising star after winning the rookie tournament. Han-il warned Doyle not to look down on him for being new, and Doyle replied that he never had, which quietly irritated Han-il again. Han-il added that In-beom used to be with the Japanese Yakuza Kita Nagumi, and his skills made him someone worth watching. Doyle thought to himself that Kita Nagumi was where that woman was. In the stands, Susie felt like she had seen fighter number 7 somewhere before. Han-il finished by saying the other fighters numbers 2, 4, 5, and 6 were ranked members of his group, so there was nothing to worry about. They were Kim Jong-ho rank 4, An Jung-gul rank 41, Jung Man-soo rank 9, and Bae Ji-hyuk rank 7. After listing them all, Han-il nervously asked who Doyle had brought. He practically begged that they not be from the Blackhead organization's special team, because he didn't want people dying here. Doyle calmly took a sip and said it wasn't anything like that. They were just his friends from the anime club. Han-il was stunned. He wondered what anime even meant, and even more how someone like Doyle could have friends at all. After finishing the drink, Doyle cut him off and told him to start the match already. Han-il got annoyed again since Doyle had emptied the whole cup too. In the ring, the announcer came out in a bunny costume and introduced herself as Yu-ah, the mascot of Death 10. As the crowd roared, she welcomed everyone to the surprise match, promising a bloody, fun Saturday night and a thrilling fight. The audience cheered loudly for Death 10. Then the 10 fighters were introduced by number, starting with number 1, An Hyo-dae, number 2, Kim Jong-ho, and number 3, Yo Hae-chul. Then came number 4, An Jung-gu, number 5, Jung Man-soo, and number 6, Bae Ji-hyuk. After them were number 7, Cha and Beom, number 8, Park Jin-gu, and number 9, Park Kang-wook. Jong-gu was number 10. Then Yo-ah announced the start of the match. Meanwhile, at Jeju International Airport, a woman made her way through the terminal. One of her subordinates informed her that the traitor was already here. She remarked that it had been a long time since she last came to South Korea. That woman was Sol Min-ju, head of operations for Kata Nagumi. Back in the ring, the tension was thick. Yura announced that this special match was packed with ranked fighters. Then fighter number 2 made the first move. The announcer called him Kim Jong-ho, currently rank 4, winner of the first Death 10, and a veteran with great skill. Jong-ho thought the lineup felt strange today. Top fighters mixed with total unknowns. With his experience, he figured hit and run was the smartest plan here. Since numbers 1 and 3 wouldn't go down easily, he chose to take out the rookies first. Park Jin-gai shouted, asking if he was the target, then said he'd gladly take the challenge. The crowd got louder, excited for the clash. Jong-ho decided to drop the big muscle head first. Easy money, easy cheers, and less damage before the next fight. The two charged at each other while the announcer hyped up the moment. Cha and Ho planned to grab an easy win, then retire at the right time. He rushed at Park Jin-guf, but Han Hyo-dae suddenly jumped in and fired a kick at his face. Yang-ho barely got his hand up in time and blocked it. He was stunned and wondered why Ha-byok was attacking now, since he had never started first in any match before. Yang-ho dodged another strike from Ha-byok, and the announcer kept reacting to this sudden aggression from Ha-byok, who usually stayed still early on to save energy. Yang-ho demanded to know if Ha-byok wanted a fight, and the other guy shot back, asking if he really thought he could handle him. Ha-byok mocked him and said not to waste his strength if he was smart, he should just jump out of the ring. With a grin, he added that the height wouldn't matter if he landed well. That sent Yang-ho into a rage. He yelled for Ha-byok to jump instead, and attacked. But Ha-byok slipped past him, landed a heavy punch, and seized him by the neck. The announcer shouted that fighter number 1, An Hyo-dae, was driving his opponent toward the edge. Yang-ho tried to fight back, but Ha-byok overpowered him and hammered his face with punches, then kicked him out of the ring. Yang-ho plunged from the full height, and Susie screamed in horror. The announcer declared he had been eliminated in a single move, then shouted in shock that rank 4 Kim Jong-ho was out at the hands of An Ha-byok. The crowd exploded in cheers, chanting An Ha-byok's name. Up in the VIP room, Han-il laughed while watching the fight. Doyle said he couldn't believe Han-il had built a place like this. Han-il defended himself, saying the fighters came for money and no one was forced. He explained that the top 5 got prize money, while the losers in 7th through 10th place sank deeper into debt. He added that keeping the ring running was expensive, so the rules had to stay harsh. Back in the ring, Han-il described the whole place as ruthless. Yeon Young-ho walked up to Park Jin-go and casually greeted him, saying it had been a while. At the same time, Yo-ho-chul was cruelly toying with Young Man-soo, who kept screaming in pain. Yo-ho-chul mocked him for talking too much, and reminded him he had warned him to stay quiet. Then he sneered, asked if Man-soo wanted his jaw broken, and kept kicking him until Man-soo begged him to stop and took back what he said. Ha-byok ignored the begging and kept stomping him. The announcer yelled that fighter number 3 Yo Ha-byok was completely wrecking fighter number 5 Jung Man-soo. In the crowd, Ha-byok's father Yo Hanga, the Haruban gang boss of Jeju, cheered him on. As the beating went on, the announcer called fighter number 5 eliminated. Young Man-soo was taken out by Yo Hae-chul. The whole crowd started chanting Yo Hae-chul's name. Kwon, who was also in the match, looked sickened, wondering how anyone could cheer while a man was dying. Then he caught Ha-byok staring at him and felt right away that this guy was a total psycho. Watching him break another fighter's arm like it was nothing only proved it. A second later, Ha-byok turned toward him with a creepy smile like he had just picked his next victim. Hae-chul walked up and mocked MC for looking weak. Panicked, MC begged him to stay back. Elsewhere in the ring, An Jung grew grabbed by his Jae-hal, and Jae-hal shouted for him to let go. Jung Gi was taking hit after hit, and clearly hurting, but he still refused to loosen his grip. John Hyuk was stuck. Jung Gi clung to him so tightly that he couldn't attack right or defend himself either. Cha and Byum and Ah and Jung Gi were teaming up against BAE John Hyuk. The announcer praised how well they were working together. Then Cha and Byum landed a clean shot to John Hyuk's face, and John Hyuk cursed them as dirty cowards. Even with body shots pouring in, An and Jung Gi still wouldn't let go of John Hyuk. John Hyuk finally grabbed him and threw him off. The announcer shouted that the number 7 ranked fighter wasn't going down so easily. John Hyuk broke through their teamwork and charged in. He went head-to-head with Cha and Byum in a brutal exchange. Now John Hyuk's years of experience started to show. Little by little, he took control of the fight against Byum and drove him toward the edge. With Byum close to falling, John Hyuk said it was over. Just as BAE John Hyuk threw the final punch at Cha and Byum, his fist suddenly stopped. John Hyuk froze, confused about what had just happened. The announcer cried out that a savior had appeared at the perfect time. Ah and Jung Gi had grabbed John Hyuk from behind. Furious, John Hyuk called him a damn leech, and wondered when he got there. The announcer explained that player number 4, Ah and Jung Gi, had caught BAE John Hyuk's leg. And Byum jumped on the chance and attacked, while the announcer shouted that nobody survives a 2-on-1 beating. The 2 lower-ranked fighters kept overwhelming the 7th-ranked John Hyuk, and Byum kept hammering him. Jung Gi held him in place while the other kept hitting without stopping. At last, Byum finished the fight with one last punch. BAE John Hyuk was eliminated. The 2 fighters stood there breathing hard, getting ready for whoever came next. Jung Gi watched in shock, wondering what kind of insane rules this was. He complained that no real sport allows gang-ups and called the whole thing madness, but the announcer sounded thrilled, saying the ranked fighters were dropping one after another. This, she said, was what Death 10 was all about. She urged the crowd to get even louder. Meanwhile, at the Harubang gang's office in Jeju, Yoo Hyun-gyu and his men lay dead in pools of blood. So Minju was there, and one of her followers reported they had recovered every USB Han-gyu had sold. Minju asked where that person was now. After checking the info, she confirmed the target was at the Death 10 arena. Back in the ring, Yoo Hae-chul walked up to Kwon and asked what his weird nickname, FIP, meant. He said it stood for Forever in Pain. Him that he'd suffered so much he had started to enjoy it. Then he offered a deal. Take out the other fighters together first and meet again in the finals. Hae-chul turned him down. He said Kwon looked too weak, and tormenting weak people was his favorite thing in the world. In another part of the ring, Jung Gi was getting battered by Byum. He tried to fight back, but Ah and Jung Gi jumped in again and grabbed him from behind, making Jung Gi even madder. Byum kept punching Jung Gi in the face. The announcer pointed out that players number 4 and 7 were teaming up again. She shouted that player number 10, Ma Jung Gi, was getting crushed, while Jung Gi yelled out, and then Ah and Jung Gi suddenly fired a heavy kick at his face. Jung Gi barely blocked it. Hyodai scolded him, asking how anyone could take their eyes off an opponent in a fight, and whether he needed the basics taught to him again. That led into a look back at the past, specifically the First Namyeol War, a major clash between the Nampo Oryom and Ilgayong groups. They fought for control over runaway teens, and the battle lasted 3 full days. In the end, Ilgayong was badly humiliated, and Nampo Oryom came out on top. An Hyodai said that even with Ju Hae-young away overseas, Bae Jachul of Ilgayong was still incredible. He was a monster who nearly crushed Nampo Oryom by himself. Hyodai added that if that beast of a man hadn't existed, things never would have led to a second war. Then he mocked Jingu for the way he was glaring at him, and asked why he was bringing Bae Jachul up again. Jingu answered that Jaichul was dead. In the ring, Jingu thought about how badly he once wanted power, even if it meant selling his soul, but he realized that old self was gone now. He declared that a new master had risen inside his chest. Then Jingu challenged Hyodai to come at him with everything he had, calling him interesting. Hyodai rushed straight at him. The announcer exploded with hype, saying the star of Death 10, player number 1, Anhua Hyodai was moving at inhuman speed. Hyodai charged so fast it shocked the crowd and swung a brutal kick at Jingu. Even though Jingu blocked with his hand, the impact still sent him flying. Then An Hyodai attacked again. He was unbelievably fast and unleashed a flurry of kicks at Jingu, ending with a strong high kick that struck Jingu's face. The announcer was stunned that player number 8 stayed standing and even fired back with a heavy punch. But Hyodai slipped past it easily and stared at him in surprise. From the VIP room, Gion watched closely. As he studied the fight, Gion realized An Hyodai was on a level close to that man. These weren't the skills of some ordinary thug. Even if his style wasn't perfect, his flashy attack pattern reminded Gion of the Russian Phoenix's close-range fighting. After a fierce exchange, Hyodai landed a clean hit. Jingu still didn't back down and tried to strike again, but Hyodai dodged it with ease. He mocked him, saying Jingu had gotten a lot stronger, and wondered how he had even survived that hit. Jingu had to admit just how strong his opponent was. Hyodai decided to push things further with a stronger move, announcing a backface kick that made Gaiyon remember the past. Jingu standing behind him, asking to become stronger. That was all Jingu had ever wanted. Gaeyeon remembered how Jingu spent years training his body, but lately he felt stuck. No matter how hard he pushed, it only got harder, like he was sinking instead of moving forward. Eventually, he started believing he'd been born with limits he could never break. Back in the present, the announcer shouted in shock because Jingu had endured the kick. The crowd whispered in disbelief, asking how this rookie was still hanging on, and praised the strength of player number 8. The announcer explained that An Hyodai-oke's back kick had missed Jingu by the tiniest margin. That started to annoy Hyodai-oke. Jingu used the opening to close the distance. The two kept trading hard blows. Then Hyodai-oke was caught off guard by how powerful Jingu's punches were. The announcer got even more excited, wondering where this hidden gem came from, and saying he was insanely strong. As the crowd got louder for player number 8, Jingu grew fiercer, throwing every strike with more power and will. He asked himself if this was really as far as he could go. Then he let out a roar full of resolve. Jingu charged with everything he had and threw a punch at Hyodai-oke, but Hyodai-oke answered with a devastating counter. The blow snapped Jingu's head back. Pain ripped through his jaw and blood spilled from his mouth. He was launched to the floor and rolled across the ring, while Gaeyeon watched in silence. The announcer declared that Jingu still couldn't break through the solid wall called An Hyodai-oke as he lay on the ring bleeding. In despair, Jingu wondered if this was all he could do. Old memories flooded back. Jingu had been born tiny, just 43 centimeters long and weighing 1.4 kilograms. Since childhood, he had always lagged behind other kids, and at school, where only the strong survive, being smaller and weaker made him an easy target for bullies. So for 14 years, Jingu lived as prey. Then a small hope appeared when Jingu started working out. His body changed crazy fast. He got taller and much stronger, and his classmates barely knew it was him. As people started seeing him differently, he got even more hooked on training. People warned him he was skipping too much school and might not get into any high school. But the more he chased strength, the closer he got to Ilgyeong High School. Even with all that effort, one hard truth stayed in front of him. Some abilities are set from birth. No matter how hard he trained, he kept feeling trapped by the weak body he was born with at 43 centimeters and 1.4 kilograms. From the day he was born, that weakness stayed with him, and no matter how people tempted him with booze or women, he only cared about training. Even knowing talent matters, he never stopped pushing himself. Jingu knew he was only a side character in life, and he knew exactly where his limits were. In the present, Jingu shocked everyone by standing back up, fists tight and ready to keep fighting. Hyodai-oke looked down on him and told him to stay on the mat, saying getting up wouldn't change a thing. Before Jingu could recover, Hyodai-oke charged him again, and the brutal exchange started right back up. Hyodai-oke even wore a confident grin. The announcer pointed out that Jingu had already taken too much damage, and now he couldn't match Hyodai-oke's speed anymore. Watching from afar, GWI recalled the moment Jingu said he'd realized something. Back then, Jingu admitted to his master GWI that everyone has limits. Meanwhile, in the ring, punch after punch and kick after kick kept landing on Jingu, and he couldn't. He said he understood that truth, but accepting it was the hard part. In this war of the world's strongest fighters, his dream had always been to become the champion, Hercules. He knew that dream was way beyond him right now, but he believed real fights could teach things a gym never could. So if he followed Doyle and gave it everything, maybe he could still get stronger. When GWI didn't answer, Jingu figured this might just be all someone like him could do. Back in the present, An Hyodai-oke drove a brutal kick into Jingu's stomach. The announcer wondered if Jingu had finally gone down, but Jingu stayed on his feet, gasping for air and refusing to quit. Then he roared. Hyodai-oke stared in disbelief that Jingu still had this much fight left. Jingu stood there, pulling power from his will, thinking about his past and all his weakness. Even if winning was impossible, he chose to keep fighting. The announcer was stunned as Jingu got up and charged again. Hyodai-oke yelled, calling him a damn lunatic. They slammed kicks into each other, their ankles crashing hard. Pain shot through Hyodai-oke, and he realized Jingu was targeting that on purpose. Then the story jumped back to the past, where GWI asked Jingu what he had just said. Jingu panicked, wondering how much GWI had heard, then noticed the wireless earbud in his hand. That's when he realized he'd been saying all his thoughts out loud. He was completely embarrassed and tried to play it off by saying it was really hot out. Then he suggested they grab a protein shake and started to leave. GWI stopped him and said he was doing well. He meant the results of Jingu's training. It wasn't perfect, but he was clearly getting better. In the present, the fight was still going hard. Hyodai-oke shouted in anger that this bastard had done it again, as he and Park Jingu smashed fists in another violent clash. The scene flashed back to 3 days before the match, when GWI was giving Jingu advice. Doyle said it wasn't the best plan because it wears down and damages the body, but if Jingu faced someone highly skilled, he should read their pattern, protect his vital spots, and overpower them with raw force. GWI added that most people couldn't pull that off, but Jingu could. Back in the present, Jingu put that plan to work, yelling as he took a storm of hits. Hyodai-oke stared in shock, wondering what kind of monster just kept eating every attack. Even through the pain, Jingu pushed forward and threw another strike. but Hyodai Oke slipped past it. The announcer said Park Jingu was taking on Hyodai Oke's attacks like a shield, caring only about landing his own. The two entered a savage trade of punches, hammering each other again and again. Neither man cared about dodging or pain anymore. They just kept throwing at the same time. The announcer called it the most violent match they had ever seen. Every hit rang through the ring. GWI admired how Jingu had built this body little by little, with endless effort and every drop of sweat. This was the body he made for himself. Then, in one huge moment, Jingu smashed a headbutt into GWI and stunned everyone, including Mina and her friend. As GWI dropped to the ground, the arena exploded with cheers. The announcer shouted that something unbelievable had happened. Park Jingu had brought down the mighty An Hyodai Oke. Gai Yen gave a small smile, like he knew from the start. Jingu could win because of all the work he had put in. Jingu stood there and let out a loud cry of victory while Gai Yen called him a true gem. Elsewhere in the ring, Ma Donggu was still in trouble, getting teamed up on by players 7 and 4. The announcer then said rookie Park Jingu used up everything he had after knocking player number 1, An Hyodai Oke, out of the match. Jingu could feel all the strength leave his body, and he collapsed to the floor. Guizhen realized the kick Jingu took earlier was why he was staggering like this now. After Park Jingu went down, Guizhen could tell even from a distance that he had a mild concussion. The announcer said Jingu had suddenly collapsed and couldn't get back up, throwing the rookie trio into real danger. Then attention shifted to Park Kang-wook as player number 3. Guizhen Hebs landed a heavy punch. Guizhen Hebs mocked him, asking if that hurt. Kang-wook, in terrible pain, begged him to wait a second, but Haichol ignored him and punched him again. From the crowd, Haichol's father, Yu Hangui, leader of the Haryubang gang in Jeju, cheered him on. Then one of his men came up to him, and Hangui snapped because he had ordered no interruptions during his son's match. But the man said it was urgent and reported that the Kitano Group's 2nd Division leader, Yuki Anna, the Snow Woman, had come to Korea. Hangui was stunned. Things got worse when he heard she had already hit their Sogwaipo office, taken the USB they had, and was now heading to the Death 10 arena. Hanaguak exploded in rage and struck his man, furious that some lowlife dared mess with them. He ordered everyone mobilized, especially Il-chul, and told them to bring that woman to him. Somewhere else in the middle of a bloody scene, Nam Il-chul, the Harabang gang's operations commander, got the call from headquarters. Back in the ring, after taking a beating, Park Jin-guak declared his surrender. Yu Hee-chul looked surprised, but Jin-guak repeated it. Even the announcer sounded shocked, while the crowd booed and Solmina, embarrassed, called him a loser. From the VIP room, Doyle calmly reminded everyone that Death 10 has no surrender rule. In the ring, Yu Hee-chul answered with a vicious kick that sent Jin-guak to the ground. With a mocking smile, he said that was right, there's no surrender here. Chul kept tormenting Park Kang-wook, coldly telling him that in this place, you either get dragged out half-crippled or fall out of the ring. He walked up and mocked him, asking what he thought he could do, then stomped hard on his foot while Kang-wook screamed in pain. Chul said he wasn't letting him off that easy because this was too fun. After that, he crushed Kang-wook's ankle again under his foot, making him shriek in agony. Chul said Kang-wook was the perfect kind of person to torture. Meanwhile, in a hidden arena hallway, Sol Minju moved forward with her men, stepping over knocked-out guards. She mocked how fancy the underground place was and wondered where these punks got the money for it. One of her men said they thought that crazy bastard who killed Okita was behind the money, and that funds from Okita's group had ended up here, though the true source was still unclear. Minju said they had to find out, since that money was theirs to begin with, then grumbled about how many designer bags it could have bought. Her follower said he'd remember that. As they kept moving, Nam Il-chul and his men blocked the path. Il-chul asked her straight up if she was the Snow Woman. Sol Minju laughed at that, asking if his boss wanted her phone number. Back in the ring, Yu Hee-chul said that was for him to decide, then cracked Park Kang-wook across the jaw and sent him flying. From the VIP room, Ganyon watched and realized that bastard was enjoying the torture using just enough force to keep his opponent awake without knocking him out, like a kid with a brand new toy. The crowd roared for Yu Hee-chul, yelling for him to crush that loser. Ganyon-wook lay on the floor, hurting badly, while the crowd laughed and told him to get up like he was just faking it. With a mocking grin, Hee-chul told Ganyon-wook to get up already. He'd been waiting long enough. He added that everyone seemed to love watching him get wrecked. The audience laughed as Ganyon-wook tried to stand again. Barely holding on, Ganyon-wook looked up and asked how Hee-chul could enjoy this. Hee-chul smiled and said of course he did. He kept mocking Kang-wook on the ground, saying everyone was laughing at him and telling him to quit squirming and stand up. Then he asked if Kang-wook were in their shoes, would he really say this wasn't fun? He went on about how people are evil by nature, saying humans are built to take pleasure in crushing anyone weaker. To him, hurting the weak was just human instinct. Right then, the crowd got even louder, chanting for him to kill Kang-wook. Hee-chul said everyone was the same and asked if Kang-wook really thought he was any different. That brought back Kang-wook's past when he bullied weaker kids and took their money for fun. Hee-chul's words kept ringing in his head, telling him to think hard about it, because he was no different from the crowd. In the corridor, Nam Il-chul stood there stunned. Yukiana had wiped out 30 of his best men in seconds, so fast he couldn't even follow it. Now he knew the white snow ghost was real. One of Yukiana's followers asked what to do with Il-chul, saying he looked pretty strong. Il-chul was already realizing how huge the gap was between the Harubang gang and Japan's top gang. Yukiana said she was in a good mood after returning home for the first time in a while, so she might let him live. Then she asked him straight out if he wanted to survive. When Il-chul said nothing, she asked again if he wanted to live. That set Il-chul off, and he snapped at her for talking down to him. He demanded to know if she expected him to beg. Calmly, she said, taking one finger would be enough. Furious, Il-chul rushed her, shouting and asking who she thought she was, but in an instant she slipped past his attack, leaving even her own followers shocked. A moment later, his throat was cut. As he choked and bled, she asked if losing a finger wouldn't have been better than dying. Then she turned away, saying she really didn't get him. Blood poured from Il-chul's neck until he finally collapsed dead. Then Solminju answered his earlier insult by telling him she was Korean. Back in the ring, Kang Wook coughed through the pain, while Hae-chul's words kept echoing. He was no different from them. As the crowd mocked how well he could take a beating, Kang Wook panted and remembered his old life as a bully, how people never get tired of watching trash like that get crushed. Slowly he pushed himself back up and admitted Hae-chul was right. He had done the same things. They were alike. The announcer cried out in surprise that player number 9, Park Kang-wook, was up again, then mocked him by asking what joke he'd put on next. The crowd kept heckling, telling him to kneel and beg if he wanted mercy. But Kang-wook was stuck in his own head, wondering why he'd done all this while thinking he was being a hero. Hae-chul cut in, asking what he was mumbling about, and if that last hit had messed up his head. Still, Kang-wook kept talking to himself, remembering someone once told him that guys like him were the real idiots. Back then, he thought that was stupid. Of course the predators were the cool ones. He brushed it off as the whining of weak prey that had nowhere left to run. But now he was finally starting to get it, who the real fool was. For the first time, Park Kang-wook raised a real fighting stance with true resolve. Even with the crowd still calling him trash and telling him to die or jump, shame hit him hard. He stared at Yu Hae-chul's vile face and couldn't believe he'd once worn that same ugly mask. Just thinking about it made him sick. The announcer shouted that even a worm fights back when stepped on, and Kang-wook charged straight at Hae-chul. Hae-chul was caught off guard for a second. Kang-wook yelled as memories of all his brutal training flashed through his head, but Hae-chul quickly saw that the punch was way slower than he expected. He dodged with ease and slammed back with a hard counter. From the VIP room, Gi-yeon said this was the expected result. Kang-wook had no chance of winning. The announcer called out that Kang-wook was down again, his 5th knockdown of the match. She shouted player number 9's name as Kang-wook lay there struggling to breathe. Then his past came flooding back. As a kid, Kang-wook hit a growth spurt early, and that alone let him coast through life, using his size to scare everyone around him. By the time the others caught up, their fear of him was already set. Even kids bigger than him still feared him. But the truth was simple. Kang-wook wasn't special, just a boy who grew faster than the rest. While he was enjoying life as a bully, someone stronger finally showed up. For the first time, Kang-wook ended up on the other side. He became the victim. He was thrown into total darkness with no way out, and suffered without end, all against his will. Only when a clueless person is forced into someone else's place do they understand how deep that misery goes, the terror and pain of living in that darkness, and the truth that he was the one who had shoved others into that hell. He remembered screaming at the person bullying him, begging to be let go, asking why he had to be the one suffering like this. That was when he finally understood how rotten he'd been. Back in the ring, Hae-chul mocked him, asking if he could still stand, calling him a fun little toy. The announcer noticed how completely Kang-wook had changed since he tried to surrender. His eyes were sharp now. This time, Kang-wook attacked first and threw a rush of punches. Hae-chul laughed at how slow they were before driving another heavy shot into his body. More memories hit Kang-wook, this time from training on Jeju Island, where the coach told them they had to finish no matter what. One day, Kang-wook apologized to Dong-gu for making them do extra training again. But Dong-gu brushed it off and said, with sarcasm, that Kang-wook had plenty more to apologize for anyway. Back in the present, Kang-wook clenched his teeth as the crowd talked about how tough rookies can be. The announcer was shocked that player number 9 Park Kang-wook endured such a brutal body shot from Yu Hae-chul. Hae-chul got excited and asked if Kang-wook wanted more before rushing him again. But this time, amazingly, Kang-wook dodged and fired back with a counter. Hae-chul only sneered, saying the punch was weak, then answered with a brutal hit that dropped Kang-wook again. Not stopping there, he blasted him upward with another savage punch. Kang-wook's mind flashed back to Jeju Island where Dong-gu tore into him. Even though Kang-wook tried to apologize, Dong-gu wouldn't accept it, asking if he really thought sorry could fix everything. He reminded Kang-wook that he still hung around the same people who used to bully him, so why act nice now? Dong-gu said he didn't know why Doyle had accepted him, but he never had, and he still couldn't forgive him. In the ring, even while struggling, Kang-wook kept pressing forward without backing off. Hae-chul grew irritated, wondering why this bastard kept charging at him. Dong-gu's words kept echoing. Kang-wook had done too much wrong to be forgiven so easily. Dong-gu called out all his excuses, like blaming cigarettes for weak lungs, and asked if he really didn't know why he kept lagging behind in training. He brought up Kang-wook's pathetic school life and said that in a world where everyone fights hard in their own place, Kang-wook had mocked other people's effort without learning anything about struggle, failure, grit, or passion. He'd only wasted his life, wasted his time, and chased nothing but quick pleasure. Dong-gu told him this was the road he chose, and this was the life that came with it. Driven by those words, Kang-wook kept advancing through Hae-chul's heavy blows, leaving even the announcer stunned. He let out a roar and rushed in with a hard kick. Hae-chul blocked it, but this time he felt the power behind it. The crowd and the announcer were left stunned as Kang-wook forced the clearly stronger Hae-chul back into a corner of the ring. Hae-chul snapped, shouting and asking if Kang-wook wanted to die. Hae-chul raged, demanding to know how a toy like Kang-wook dared look him in the eye. Then he sneered that getting cornered didn't mean a thing. Those weak, slow punches were never going to beat him. The announcer yelled that Kwon was charging in again, but this time he was moving much faster. He finally landed a clean hit. Still, Hae-chul mocked him, calling him an idiot and asking what he thought that would do. Then he fired back with a brutal kick that sent Kwon flying. That impact pulled the protagonist back to Dong-gu's lecture on the beach in Jeokwai. Back then, Dong-gu told him to start living right from now on. While Doyle, Mina, and GWI Yeon watched from afar, he kept scolding him, telling him to stop hiding behind weak excuses like ruined lungs from smoking. Dong-gu said he needed to take life seriously. He had to face his mistakes, pay for them, and fix what he could. Then Dong-gu pulled out a revival coupon and set it in front of him. He said Kwon would get a stamp each time he helped them, and told him to fill it up the right way. In other words, he needed to really help out. Then Dong-gu made him promise. He reminded MC that he still owed him for saving him before, and because of the extra training time that day, he said he would forgive him. Back in the ring, Hae-chul was shocked to realize Kwon had grabbed his leg while falling. He held on to Dong-gu's words, and the fact that he had forgiven him. With that thought pushing him forward, the protagonist launched himself from the ring's edge. He dragged Hae-chul down with him into the air, leaving the announcers stunned. Both fighters crashed hard outside the ring. The fall wrecked them both. Kwon had it worst. Pain tore through his whole body as they lay there covered in blood. In the past, Dong-gu had once helped an exhausted MC walk. Later, he kept his promise to help them and become better. Then he quietly asked Mae Dong-gu to stamp the coupon. The coupon showed one stamp, meaning the debt for that extra training was paid. The announcer said Kwon tried to take Hae-chul down for the long game, but ended up falling with him. Hae-chul looked badly hurt. The protagonist, though, was still awake. From the crowd, Han-gu snapped and cursed MC out. He ordered his men to bring him to Mo right away. But one of them cut in, nervous, saying something even more urgent had happened. The squad sent to kill Yuki Anna had been wiped out completely. Han-gu froze at the news, then angrily told them to call the Jeju Union. In the ring, the announcer said that with Jeju still recovering, only 3 fighters were left in the match. Dong-gu was still getting hammered, but he finally slipped away from Han-gu. In that key moment, he seemed to figure something out. He started dodging player number 7, Chal and Banam's attacks and focused only on player number 4, Han-gu, escaping the trap between both of them. Han-gu dropped in pain from all the damage he had taken in both fights, but Dong-gu still wasn't safe. Chal and Banam came right back at him. Dong-gu dodged the first kick and blocked the next one. He could feel just how overwhelming his opponent's strength was, and even with all his training, barely held on. The announcer said Chal and Banam was completely overpowering the worn-out Dong-gu with terrifying attacks. He wondered if exhausted Dong-gu had any answer at all for this assault. At the same time, Baishim was thinking about how fast Dong-gu was. Elsewhere in the arena halls, Sol Minju walked with her assistant and complained that the place was such a maze. No wonder the police couldn't catch them. She asked if he was really sure there was an elevator to the lower floors. She also doubted every visitor came through there and guessed there had to be another entrance. Her assistant admitted he didn't know this was his first time there too. Minju called him useless as a secretary, then asked if Chae Nim Baejum was definitely there, and he said yes. After that, she tossed her empty can away and headed for the ring. There, Dong-gu kept battling Chae Nim Baejum and narrowly avoided a heavy punch. The announcer called it an amazing turn. He wondered if Dong-gu had started reading Baejum's patterns, since more and more attacks were missing him. Dong-gu was already planning ahead when the next strike came. He ducked under it fast and aimed a counter at his opponent's side, but before he could land it, Dong-gu suddenly grabbed him after returning to the fight. Chae Nim was stunned. He was sure those ribs had been broken. So how was Han-gu still moving? Han-gu shouted that he couldn't hold Dong-gu for long. Mbaeum took the chance and pounded the trapped Dong-gu. That brought Han-gu back to the past, when Mbaeum reminded him about the 80 million won debt from his mother's hospital bills and the 2 younger siblings she left behind. Even if the situation was awful, he had to squeeze something out of it. Mbaeum asked if he understood what kind of place Death 10 was before joining. One wrong move, he warned, and Han-gu could end up in even deeper debt. Worse, this cursed place could leave someone totally broken and dumped on the street, and to the people running it, that would be just another workday. Back in the ring, the announcer shouted that it was another 2-on-1, with Dong-gu trapped all over again. Dong-gu yelled for them to let go, while hitting Ongu. Ongu coughed up blood, his body already wrecked from all the damage he'd taken. Then he cried out and shoved Donggu hard toward the outside of the ring. The announcer noted that the more Donggu fought back, the tighter Ongu held him. Even so, Donggu refused to quit and kept striking Ongu's back. Ongu kept driving him toward the edge of the ring. Donggu stopped at the edge, but his fists never did. Ongu yelled at Mbayam to finish it fast, and Mbayam rushed in. Another memory surfaced. Che Mbayam had once asked Ongu to team up with him. He reminded him that Death 10's prize was 1.5 billion won, more than enough to clear his debts and send his siblings to school. In that memory, Mbayam kept pushing the alliance, saying their odds would be better together, and promising to help him take first place. When Ongu asked why he picked him, Mbayam said he still had a lot of money from earlier fights, that his mother had been a kind woman, and now it was time to repay that kindness. Back in the present, right at the edge of the ring, everything changed. Che Mbayam betrayed his own partner, kicking both Ongu and Donggu out of the ring at once. Meanwhile, in a hallway, Sol Min-ju sarcastically pointed out the hidden elevator in a place like this. Back at the ring after kicking out the last fighters, Mbayam looked down at Ongu outside. With a sly grin, he said he had made it this far thanks to him. So now it was time to pay that debt back. At the same time, Sol Min-ju called someone a backstabbing bastard, and wondered how best to deal with him. Back in the ring, Donggu screamed as he fell, but Jingu suddenly got up and caught him before he dropped. With a huge roar, Jingu jumped and saved Donggu at the very last second. Then he hurled him back into the ring. The announcer was stunned, shouting that player number 8 Jingu had stepped in to save Donggu from danger. Jingu then slammed hard onto the ground outside the ring. The crowd and announcer wondered if players 8 and 10 had been a team the whole time. The announcer declared that only 2 fighters were left in the ring. The whole arena exploded in cheers. Donggu got back up and was startled when Jingu wasn't in the ring. He shouted Jingu's name. Meanwhile, the announcer said that confirmed it. They really had been teammates. Donggu looked shaken by that. Mbayam didn't give him a second to breathe and attacked right away. Donggu dropped fast to avoid it. Mbayam was seriously irritated. He thought he only needed to deal with Anhu Dayak and Yuhi Chel, so these 2 newcomers showing up out of nowhere had completely messed things up for him. He called them cowards for secretly teaming up. Donggu remembered how Mbayam had teamed with Anku, using him to take the hits before betraying him in the end. So Donggu called him out, saying he had teamed up too. But Mbayam laughed it off and called his former partner a worthless idiot who only knew how to be a punching bag, saying he was useless. He insisted there was no such thing as teammates. Anyone who trusted someone else was just a fool. Then he told Donggu he only survived by tricking that big lump of meat, meaning Jingu. Donggu stared at him in disgust. He told him not to compare them, making it clear they were nothing alike. A memory flashed of the Suman friends smiling together in a beach photo. Donggu shot back that if their places were switched he would have saved Jingu too, because that's what anyone decent would do. He said that's how real feelings work. When someone is sincere with you, you answer with the same sincerity. Even a monster should get that. And Bayam just laughed, asking if Donggu thought he was a monster too, then said monsters get hunted because they're dumb and outdated. He sneered that Donggu had no clue how the world really worked. Then he cursed him as a punk brat and lunged in. The announcer yelled that Chad Bayam had charged forward. Even with the sudden rush, Donggu slipped past the attacks. Bayam clicked his tongue in annoyance, but the next hit caught Donggu clean. Still, Donggu kept trying to fight back. Bayam told him he could read the timing of every punch so none of it would ever land. Then he fired back with a crushing counter. Donggu flashed back to training with Doyle, where he complained he was worn out at his limit and couldn't keep going. Doyle, chewing a donut, coldly told him to get up. He wasn't going to die. Donggu snapped that all his effort wasn't helping at all. Doyle barely cared and stayed focused on his phone. Back in the present, Donggu refused to quit and kept attacking. Bayam mocked him for being too slow and laughed at the idea that anyone would get hit by that. The announcer confirmed Donggu still hadn't landed a clean shot. Standing over him, Bayam thought about Park Jingu and decided that even badly hurt Jingu was still a bigger threat than Donggu. He ridiculed Jingu for making such a stupid choice to save him, then hammered Donggu with more punches and a kick, still mocking that so-called heroic move. Another memory hit Donggu. His brutal training on the beach. He begged for just 5 minutes to rest, saying he was training extra while everyone else slept and he wasn't some machine. Donggu answered flatly that there was no time to rest. As the pressure kept coming, Donggu yelled that Doyle was cruel and asked how he could sit there eating while he was starving and suffering. Doyle reminded him this was what he asked for. Since Donggu said he could do it, he had to keep going. That sudden serious tone left Donggu stunned. Back in the ring, Bayam still couldn't understand what anyone saw in Donggu that would make them throw their lives away for him like idiots. While he kept beating him down, Donggu remembered asking Doyle why he was pushing this so far. Doyle said he wasn't there for fun. Donggu asked for this and now they were walking this road together. Even if it seemed impossible, Donggu had to trust him. Once again, Doyle told him, "You can do it." Those words lit a fire in Donggu and he kept trying to strike back. The announcers were shocked that he still had enough strength to answer the attack. As he repeated to himself, "I can do it," Donggu poured everything into his fist and drove straight at Nbm. But the gap between them was obvious. He still couldn't match Nbm's speed. Nbm mocked him, saying his punch was too wide and easy to read. Then he threw what looked like the final blow. Facing the worn-out Donggu, Nbm called him and his friends pathetic trash. At that same moment, Sol Minju stepped into the ring. Then Donggu suddenly used a move called the gun and blasted Nbm to the ground. The commentators went silent, and Sol Minju stared in shock. One last memory flashed by Doyle, telling Donggu to trust him now that they had chosen this path together. Nbm was stunned and had no idea what had just hit him. Donggu held on to Doyle's words, "Trust your teammate." Then Ma Donggu unleashed a storm of punches, leaving the crowd in shock. Another quick flashback came. Doyle's voice saying the only way to survive was to trust your teammate. From the stands, Sol Minju wondered if that technique came from the Blackhead organization. Using up the last of his strength, Donggu slammed Nbm down onto the ring floor and looked toward the VIP room where Doyle was watching. He also remembered being much younger, when Doyle used to carry him on his back. From afar, Doyle watched him without looking away. Then the arena exploded with cheers. Donggu's team had won the bloody match through the effort of both the fighters and the coaches. The announcer declared the Death 10 Stadium event over as the crowd chanted Mei Donggu's name. He had won the match and received the champion's medal. Sol Minju couldn't believe it, wondering how this loser could actually win. Sol Minju was just as confused. How could someone who looked this pathetic use a blackhead technique? Taking the mic, Donggu started by thanking the anime club and admitted he never thought he'd really win. Minju still couldn't make sense of any of it when she suddenly spotted Doyle in the VIP room and froze in shock. In her head, one name came up, Kim Doyle. She couldn't understand why he was here, and guessed he might be after old man Okita's money. That made her angry. The mess he caused in Japan was already bad enough. So what else did he want? Then it seemed like Doyle noticed her. He was casually talking to GWI Yun and asking if he could pack some food to go. Minju cut off her own thoughts and decided things had gotten messy. She told her subordinate to prepare to leave. He was shocked, reminding her that Chaff and Bayon was right there, and she had waited a long time for this. Even so, she said they were leaving immediately, because something here wasn't supposed to be. She warned that if they stayed, they might get dragged into something ugly, and dealing with Kim Doyle would be a huge pain. In the stadium hallway, Sol Minju suddenly stopped and asked the group blocking her way who they were. Their leader stepped up and said he ran the COGWI Paul gang. Kim Doyle man said he heard she had the USB taken from the Haru Bang gang, and if she handed it over quietly, they'd let her leave in peace. Minju let out a sigh and said bullies these days were seriously pathetic. Then she asked if that drive really held the source of Okita's money. The gang leaders tensed up like she had caught them on the spot. Minju decided she could check the truth later, because she didn't want to waste any more time there. She told them to come at her all at once. 3 days later, at the hospital, Park Kang-wook tried to get Dongwoo to stamp his coupon again, but Dongwoo refused. The three who fought in the tournament were recovering together. Meanwhile, Park Jinja was happily lifting weights through his injuries, while Donggai yelled at him to put some clothes on. Then they brought up the prize money. Donggai and Kang-wook demanded to know where it went, and Doyle calmly said he spent it on a noble cause, so they should let it go. Kang-wook exploded and asked if he wanted to fight, but Doyle coolly asked, with knives? That made Kang-wook instantly fold and say he was only joking. Later, it turned out every bit of the prize money had gone to Doyle's luxury hotel suite, which cost 5 million won a night during the whole hell training period. Donggu complained to GWI Yeon, calling Doyle a bully for taking all the money, but GWI Yeon defended him, saying maybe it really was for a noble cause. Their leader makes over 100 million won an hour, so lying over such a small amount made no sense. Donggu and Mina's friend were stunned by that number, while Kang-wook shouted at them for buying such nonsense. And just like that, the hell training was over. The news then reported that 4 gang leaders in Jeju, including the Harabang boss, had vanished, and police still had no solid leads. Elsewhere, Sol Minju's father scolded her for her bad temper. She answered that anyone trying to rise up had to be crushed, and that he was being too soft. She added that she had her own reasons and told him to stop lecturing her. In a bloody aftermath, the mission seemed complete. Chaff and Bayom lay covered in blood in front of her. She told her father she planned to stay in Korea for now. After a month in the hospital, the group went back to Seoul. In the anime club room, Donggu proudly showed his friends the medal from the Death 10 tournament. But they had no idea what that tournament even was, and made fun of him, asking since when he became cool. Donggu turned to Mina and asked her to back him up. She just sighed and said she had no idea what he was talking about. When the new semester started a little later for them, Ba Yuhwan, the number 3 of Seokdong High, staggered around in pain. He remembered GWI Jian cornering him and coldly telling him to pick his arm or his leg. Ji Yuhwan angrily thought that if GWI Jian hadn't injured him, he would have won easily. But the man told him to choose carefully, because his leader Wang Guohui had been kicked out of the 12 nations. The National Union and the dirty cop backing them wouldn't be giving any more help. He made it clear they had nowhere left to run. Then he asked again where the Seokdong gang had hidden the data for its illegal gambling site. Yuhwan shouted that he knew nothing, and tried to kick him. The big man dodged, grabbed him and slammed him hard to the ground. Then he mocked him, saying if he really didn't know, he should say, "I'll go find out." That's how weak punks like him should act. He kept hoisting Ba Yuhan up and smashing him into the floor. Then he hurled him into a wall so hard, Ba Yuhan felt it all at once. After that, the big guy told him to remember his place. This was Ba Yuhan Sokdong's number 3, talking down to him like he was nothing. When the new term began, their next target was Hwarin High. The Sumon group showed up at a workshop in Hwarin. Donggu snapped at the girls, asking why they always tagged along and got in the way. Nina shot back that every team needs a pretty girl cheering them on. Ba Yuhan noticed them and wondered who they were. He sneered, asking if that sneaky bastard had called backup, then dismissed GWI Jian's group as nobodies. Out of nowhere, GWI Jian appeared behind Ba Yuhan. He moved so fast it almost looked like teleporting. Before Ba Yuhan's men could react, GWI Jian struck. He used the scattershot technique and dropped every student in an instant. That was how Samin Hai's anime club started its war to wipe out Hwarin. Seoul had 3 big troublemaker schools, Iljiang, Sokdong, and Hwarin. And if you asked which one was the worst, almost everyone would say Hwarin. One reason was the custom drugs they made. Those drugs ruined countless lives, making Hwarin the lowest of the low. But what really made Hwarin terrifying was its huge size and massive money. On top of that, 2 members of the 12 nations were with them. 4 years earlier, all the major gangs in Seoul got pulled into a war called the Rebellion. 2 of the 12 nations clashed head-on, and both sides took huge losses. Still, nobody thought it would be over in only 2 weeks. That happened because of one boy, Ju Sang. Someone who seemed beyond belief. By himself, he crushed both sides. So at just 14, Sanga became the first middle schooler to join the 12 nations. People treated him like heaven had chosen him, and called him the son of God, Ju Sang. Then came the shock. This legend was serving someone else. Hwarin's current leader, Ju Yujin. Almost nothing is known about Ju Yujin. Face, gender, past, all of it is a mystery. Only one thing is clear. Ju Sang-ah lost to Ju Yujin, and the fight lasted just 3 seconds. Back in the present, at an arcade, Donggu desperately tried to make Dojin understand how bad this was. He said Hwarin had more than 100 members, maybe even 200. Donggu reminded him that even his fight with Kwok lasted around 5 minutes, while Ju Yujin beat Ju Sang-ah in 3 seconds flat. Dojin barely cared, and Donggu begged him to start taking Hwarin seriously. But Dojin said it was already too late. He'd already sent Hwarin a declaration of war. Then he showed a deepfake video, using Donggu's face on somebody else's body. In it, fake Donggu said they were coming to destroy Hwarin next Friday, and promised there would be no mercy. Donggu stared at him in shock, and asked if he really sent that, and the story shifted to Hwarin. The video kept playing, laying out the surrender terms. Ju Yujin had to kneel before them, and Hwarin had to hand over every bit of proof tied to making and selling illegal drugs. The warning ended with one last message. If they had any brains or conscience left, they'd choose wisely. At Hwarin headquarters, Min-so, the school's number 3, watched the video while eating. With a sarcastic laugh, he said that little runt who beat Bhe Chul and Kwok a week ago was now declaring full war on them. Min-so was hearing all this from Ba Yuhan. Earlier, after beating him, Dojin told Ba Yuhan he would now serve as their eyes and ears, a spy. The device he gave him could send live video and sound straight to him. It was also a bomb he could set off whenever he wanted. If Ba Yuhan tried anything smart, Dojin said he'd blow his head off. Min-so asked if the people from that video were also the ones who wrecked his face, and the look he gave him was enough to make the threat clear. Ba Yuhan dropped to his knees and begged forgiveness. Min-so told him to get up. Sorry meant nothing. If you messed up, you got punished. And for Ba Yuhan, that meant losing an eye. Earlier at the arcade, Donggu was still yelling at Dojin. Hwarin had way too many people, and sending that warning only gave them time to get ready. He demanded to know what Dojin was thinking. Dojin calmly said he never planned to follow what the declaration said. That answer scared Donggu so badly he dropped to the floor crying. Then Dojin revealed the truth. They were hitting Hwarin tonight. The whole thing was a trick. Back at Hwarin, Min-so asked the fat man which eye he wanted, left or right. Bu Hwarin begged for one more chance. Min-so laughed and said he wasn't talking about Bu Hwarin's eye. He meant their enemies, so which one would be enough? Bu Hwarin meekly answered that either eye was fine, or both. Min-so liked that answer. Both eyes would be better. He said people who screw up have to pay. And once things reached this point, there was no going back. Dojin explained that the declaration of war was only there to provoke them. In the present, Min-so punished Bu Hwarin by tearing out one of his eyes. Dojin said an enemy blinded by rage will slip up, and most of Hwarin's people were loyal to Bu Hwarin. Bu Hwarin screamed that his men would never obey Min-so. That was exactly what Dojin wanted. Chaos inside Hwarin. Then Min-so showed up with a sword and mocked Bu Hwarin, saying maybe he hadn't beaten him hard enough last time. As he got ready to finish it, he added that Bu Hwarin's death wouldn't matter to Hwarin at all. Min-so pressed the attack. While that happened, Dojin explained they would use the infighting to their advantage, and backup was already on the way. Then 2 men came through the window, GWI Yan and Jingu. Min-so stopped and stared, trying to figure out who they were. Elsewhere in Hwarin's dorms, students heard noise coming from the 3rd floor. GWI Yan told Jingu that help would come up from the second floor soon, so he needed to block the hallway. Then GWI Yan faced Minsu alone and said he'd handle him. Shaken, Minsu asked who he was. GWI Yan took him down with ease. Dojin said this was how they would bring Hwarin down. In another room, Ju-san Kress, Hwarin's number 2, sat there confused when Dojin walked in. Dojin got right to it and asked where Ju Yujin was. Meanwhile, at Hwarin's back gate, Kang Wook got ready for his part of the plan. He knew this place wasn't a normal school. It only looked like an ordinary boarding school from the outside. After 6 o'clock, every staff member left and the students were on their own. Kang Wook was sure the place turned into a drug factory after dinner. He remembered Dojin's orders. Make a scene on the first floor and split the enemy up so they wouldn't notice Jingu sneaking into the third floor. He also had to catch Sang Hyo, Hwarin's number 5, and force him to reveal the exact location of the drug lab. Kang Wook felt like he got the toughest job, but he chose to go all in, so he shouted for the Hwarin students to come out and face him. The first floor dorm students heard him. They wondered what kind of lunatic was yelling outside. Kang Wook kept calling them out, trying to hold on to his nerve because now it was all or nothing. Back at the arcade, Dojin told Dongguro his part was done and he could leave. Dongguro had no clue what he'd even done, then suddenly noticed Ju Sang-a nearby and recognized him. Dojin said he already knew, handed Dongo a stuffed doll and told him to run it to Kang Wook at Hwarin, just 10 minutes away, and help with the mission. Dongo didn't get why the doll mattered, but Dojin said it was important and he couldn't lose it. When Dongo asked what it was, Dojin cut him off and told him to move. They were out of time. He said he'd stay behind and deal with Ju Sang-a himself. A flashback explained why. During Bayu Hwarin's interrogation, he admitted he'd never even seen Ju Yujin, and that all orders came through Ju Sang-a. Dojin's goal was simple: find Ju Yujin and cut off Hwarin's head. Meanwhile, Ju Sang-a quietly thought things over. Back at the Hwarin workshop, Minsu stood there with a kendo sword over the students he had beaten. A moment later, GWI Yan was right in front of him. Minsu was stunned by his opponent's speed and couldn't believe he had closed the gap that fast. He reminded himself that kendo is all about controlling distance, then stepped in hard and swung a heavy strike at GWI Yan's head, the move he called the Flower of Kendo. Minsu froze when he realized he still couldn't hit GWI Yan. The strike had perfect power, speed, timing, and aim. In his mind, dodging it should have been impossible. Yan said that swing was pretty dangerous, then gave Minsu credit for being skilled enough to close the gap that fast. Minsu demanded to know who Yan was. He asked if they were from Sumin High School. Then he snapped that attacking early when they were supposed to meet next week was plain disrespectful. Gian answered that they just picked the fastest way to deal with this. Manho cursed them as trash and demanded to know what they wanted. Gian said he didn't know his leader wanted them wiped out, and he was only following orders. Manho laughed at that. He told Gian to come try it, then charged in. Gian wondered if Manho would go for the head again. Manho faked a strike to the head, planning to switch at the last second and hit the body instead. Gian saw right through it and stopped the blow with his hand. Manho stared at him and called him an idiot. He mocked Gian for trying to block a wooden sword barehanded. Sure, the hit would crush his bones. Instead, Gian used a mid-level blackhead technique called sword. With one hand strike, he broke the wooden sword apart. Manho jumped back in shock, unable to believe it. He couldn't understand how Gian had sliced through top-grade ebony with his bare hand. Terrified, Manho wondered who Gian really was and how he had done that. But Gian was surprised too. His attack had been solid, yet Manho still partly dodged it. He admitted Manho was clearly above the opponents he'd fought before. Gian thought this would be easier if he were trying to kill, but Doyle's warning came back to him. They weren't allowed to. Holding back and matching his enemy's level still felt odd to him, and he knew he had a long way to go. Manho yelled, asking what he kept mumbling about. Gian kept thinking about Doyle's words, especially about fighters like Wang Guokui and Bai Guichu. Doyle believed that with real training, they could have passed the elite team easily. He figured there were probably 10 more like that, maybe even stronger. Gian wondered if talents like that could really exist in South Korea, especially among high schoolers. Elsewhere, a white-haired figure sat in a tub filled with blood. Gian honestly hoped it was true that he'd find stronger fighters who could rival him. Back in the fight, Gian and Minho clashed hard as Minho roared and rushed him. He swung at full speed, but Gian kept slipping past every attack with ease. Minho was stunned by that speed. He had practiced this move hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of times, and it had never failed him before. Once again, Gian dodged the blade, then he drove a hard punch into Minho's face. While Minho was still refusing to accept it, Gian followed with a technique that made his attacks 5 times faster. A storm of blows crashed into Minho's body, and Minho couldn't believe what was happening. Still, he fought through the pain and swung back with all his strength. Gian pressed on, this time using the gun technique to put Minho down for good. Bleeding and shocked, Minho dropped to the floor. He muttered that losing was impossible for him, then collapsed completely. Gian stayed where he was, breathing hard. As he caught his breath, Doyle's warning came back. There were probably 10 more fighters like this, maybe stronger, with power near elite team level. Elsewhere, Dongguro ran with the stuffed doll, grumbling that Kim Doyle always made wild moves without asking him first. He couldn't believe Doyle had suddenly chosen tonight to start a riot. He also remembered Doyle telling him before to protect the doll carefully. Dong-ga was sure there was something hidden inside it, and that thought made him nervous. Then he slammed into someone and fell hard, clutching his sore backside. He quickly apologized and said he was in a rush, but the stranger cut him off and asked if he was Mei Jong-ga from Suman High School. Dong-ga froze, shocked and confused about who this man was. The stranger introduced himself as the leader of the National Union's third team. Back in the present, Doyle faced Ju Sang-ga, who asked if Doyle wanted to rise to the top. Then he told him to try if he wanted, but said he'd never win, so he should drop the dream and just tell him where Ju Sang was. Zhao Sang studied Doyle, wondering if he was one of those rare strong men who didn't brag. Then Doyle moved with shocking speed, leaving Sang confused. Sang judged his aura as strange but ordinary looking, and guessed his level was around Hachakeo's. What surprised him most was that he'd never heard of someone that strong, so he guessed Doyle might be the National Union's new 7th team leader. Doyle shut that down as nonsense, and told him to quit talking, and say where Jaikeo Jin was. Sang-ah only got more excited, asking if that meant he'd guessed right. Was Doyle the Union's new hidden weapon? He brought up rumors that Iljeong Sokdong and the National Union were quietly shifting Seoul's balance of power. Maybe now it was Hwarin's turn, he said, before mocking the men of the 12 nations, as all talk. That was enough for Sang-ah. He knew Doyle wouldn't speak willingly, so force was the only option. He declared that from now on he'd fight seriously, addressing Doyle as the 7th team leader. Doyle answered with a threat. Elsewhere, inside a rich, dim room, a hidden figure slowly came into view. Rumors said this person bathed in the blood of young women, loved dead bodies, and killed people to drink their blood and eat their flesh. The man wondered what others really thought of him, and whether any of it was true. Did he truly love corpses? Did he really eat human flesh? Did he enjoy killing? Even he admitted he didn't know what he really was. Then he softly called out, "Mom." He wondered if he even truly existed. The figure was revealed to be Qi Jin, leader of Hwarin High School and one of the 12 nations. Elsewhere in a drug lab, a worker complained about wearing a choking gas mask every day of the year in that disgusting place, saying it felt like his body was rotting. He asked why he kept making these poisons. His coworker asked if that question was meant for him, since he worked non-stop too. The first worker said that when he was a kid, he once watched a TV documentary about a Polish man named Stefan Jervis, a man said to have superhuman senses. They said his nerve speed was 3 times faster than normal, over 330 meters per second, while regular people only reach about 50 to 120. The reason was his myelin sheaths, which carry nerve signals, were thicker and wider than normal people's. Because of that, he could feel tiny air shifts and changes in heat and pressure, using them to sense objects around him. With that ability, he could avoid nearby objects even while blindfolded. His nerves reacted in just 0.03 seconds, making him the kind of freak who could catch a fly with chopsticks. The worker admitted that as a kid, he thought the show was fake, but one day he saw something just as unreal with his own eyes, and that superhuman was the youngest member ever of the 12 nations, Ju Sang-ah. The worker asked if his partner had ever met someone who could see the future. In the past, Ju Sang-ah pointed out 2 girls in the hall and said one of them was about to lose her balance and fall. A moment later, it happened exactly like he said. The boy beside him asked how he knew, and Sang-ah said he felt a tiny shake in her muscles right before she fell. The worker said that was exactly his point. It was beyond what normal people could understand. That power was called almost godlike, which is why he earned the name Son of God, Chu Sang-ah. But the story makes one thing clear. The man who brought down that Son of God was Qi Jin, the current leader of Hwarin. The worker then showed his face. It was Im Sang-ha-yo, number 5, getting ready to board a luxury liner. Meanwhile, Doyle and Ju Sang-ah kept trading blows. Doyle read his power as a hyperreactive nervous system, but to him it was just incredibly annoying. They exchanged attacks and Doyle finally landed a clean punch. It struck Sanga's face, though he cut the damage by moving at the last second. He jumped back right away to open the distance. Sanga's was rattled, wondering how Doyle had done that. He could track every tiny movement Doyle made, but somehow he still couldn't read the attacks. He was sure he'd seen movement from Doyle's lower body, so why was a fist in front of his face instead of a kick? Doyle answered coldly that even if he explained it, Sang-ah still wouldn't be able to do it. That made Sang-ah furious, and he told Doyle not to get cocky. He claimed he still hadn't used his full power, then attacked again. Doyle immediately noticed Sang-ah had gotten faster. He could tell Sang-ah was now pushing his top speed. Sang-ah came in with a sudden kick, but when he turned, he realized he'd only hit the wall. He couldn't believe it. He was sure he'd had Doyle. Doyle fired back with a kick of his own, but Sang-ah slipped away from it as the brutal exchange kept going. Sang-ah fired off a string of punches, but Doyle blocked everyone. Then Doyle landed a heavy punch that sent Sang-ah flying. Still glaring back, Sang-ah got ready to keep fighting. At the drug lab, Sang-hai talked about why he stayed. He'd never even met Qi Jin, but seeing someone as gifted as Sang-ah was enough to keep him in that filthy place. To him, his own mind and Sang-ah's near superhuman talent were gifts from God. He said one dose of the drug that slows time could wipe out all those dull, empty hours. He remembered walking with Sang, and seeing him catch a sparrow with his bare hands. Sanga complained that everything around him moved way too slowly, and Sang Hyo felt like he was living alone in a slow world. But now that slow world had become Ju Sanga's hell. Even with his hyper-reactive nerves, he was helpless against Doyle, who moved even faster. Doyle mocked him for being slow. The insults only made Sanga angrier, along with the fact that he still couldn't match Doyle's speed. Since childhood, Sanga had watched the whole world crawl around him. Then Doyle smashed another punch into his face and sent him crashing to the ground. Doyle kept tearing him down, saying Sanga had probably never hit the ground before. His body always fixed things first, thanks to that hyper-reactive system. Doyle called it a curse. You can't really fear the world until you've fallen. Then he sneered, asking if Sanga was mad. He blasted him for acting hurt over his pride when they were just making drugs and ruining people's lives, calling them frogs in a well. Doyle said he'd show him the real world outside it. Enraged, Sanga charged at full speed. Doyle used the snipe technique, vanishing from right in front of him, then came back with scattershot and unloaded a storm of strikes on Sanga. Sanga was stunned. Even with his insane nerves, he still couldn't follow Doyle. That's when he realized his opponent wasn't human. A chilling thought hit him. He hadn't known there were two monsters like this. After Sanga dropped to the ground in defeat, Doyle walked over and told him to quit faking it. Then he got straight to the point. Hand over Kyujin. Elsewhere, Dong was caught off guard by what he heard, but Choi Ho made it clear he meant it. He was offering him a place in the 12 nations. Dong couldn't hide his surprise. So Choi Ho explained that his group handles contracts with the 12 nations across the country, and works to stop wars and clashes between them, so everyone can live in peace. But Ilgwang and Sukdong, two groups under those contracts, had fallen at the same time. Choi Ho said he knew what Donggu was behind it. Inside, Donggu panicked. Kim Doyle was the one who had actually done all that. Choi Ho went on, saying not many people could beat both BG. Choi Ho of Ilgwang and Wang Kwak Woi of Sukdong. That's why he said he wanted Donggu as a friend. He formally explained that 2 seats in the 12 nations were now empty, and Mr. Mot Donggu was their best choice. He told him to consider it in a good way, then slipped in a threat. If he refused, they'd blame him for the war involving Ilgwang, Sukdong, and the other nations tied to them. Donggu agreed right away, knowing this guy would never leave him alone otherwise. He still had to deliver the doll to Park Kang-wook, so he took the deal just to move on. Then he tried to leave fast, grumbling that he'd already wasted too much time there. Choi Ho let him go, then asked his companion what he thought of him. A figure stepped out of the shadows. It was Wan Hee-dong. Wan Hee-dong said he couldn't believe that guy beat Wan Kwak-woi, since he looked like some nerdy student. Choi Ho just smiled and agreed. Back with Doyle, Jo Sanga had been completely crushed. He couldn't understand how someone could kick an opponent in the solar plexus that hard when the other guy wasn't even trying to fight back. To him, Doyle was insane. Standing over him, Doyle warned that if he stayed quiet again, he'd make sure Sanga couldn't even use his hands to eat. Then he asked again in a cold voice, "Where is Kyujin?" Lying on the ground, Jo Sanga started laughing. He asked why Doyle was so desperate to find Kyujin and warned that meeting him would get him killed. He admitted Doyle's techniques were incredible and knew he couldn't beat him in another fight. But against Kyujin, those moves were child's play. In despair, he wondered why Doyle was trying to unleash that thing on the world. Somewhere else, in a fancy room, an injured woman woke up and found Kyujin over her. She screamed and begged him not to kill her. Yojin calmly asked why he would do that and what had scared her so badly. He kept pressing, asking what he had done to her and whether he had really tried to hurt her. Sanga told Doyle that Kyujin had even killed his own parents. He was a devil with no remorse. In the present, Yojin listened as the injured woman said he had attacked her just moments earlier. Yojin kept questioning it like he truly had no memory of attacking her. Back in the alley, Sanga explained that Yojin couldn't feel guilt because he couldn't even remember what he'd done. He had selective amnesia. He could do something horrible, then erase it from his mind like it meant nothing. Another moment showed Yojin trying to comfort the woman, apologizing while she sat there confused. Sanga said he still didn't know if Yojin really forgot or was just acting. To him, Kyujin was evil itself, something that should never exist in this world. He remembered another past incident. After one more atrocity, Yojin innocently asked, "Did I do this again?" That day, Sanga told him he'd destroy himself someday, so he promised to make a drug to fix the problem within 3 years, and until then, Yojin just had to stay locked in that room for his own safety. Sanga believed that man could never be allowed outside. Then he revealed what Yojin wanted in return: his mother. The body of the mother he had killed himself. Sanga had no way to get a body that was already cremated, so after days on the dark web, he found a fake mummy that looked 99% real, and gave it to him. Jo Sanga went on, saying Kyujin cried for hours while holding that fake mummy, then suddenly said his mother had been cremated. That left Sanga totally confused. What did those tears mean and why ask for the body at all? He admitted Kyujin's power was terrifying and overwhelming, and that his very existence was what made Hwoarang different. He added that even the psycho BG Chilol wouldn't cross into Hwoarang's turf. Sanga stayed near that monster because he didn't want to lose his place of power. But the truth was, the one who wanted distance most was Kyujin himself. Meanwhile, in Yojin's room, a woman lay on the bed bleeding from the neck, with a huge white snake wrapped around her. Yojin was thinking Sang-ho was late for the meeting he had set for him, and wondered how he dared break his word. Back in the alley, Sang-ho thought Doyle could never understand Yojin. Nothing in his actions or goals followed any logic. Before he could give one last warning, Doyle kicked him hard in the face and cut him off, saying he'd talked too much. The kick threw him into the air. He hit the ground and tried to rise, but the pain stopped him. Doyle rushed in and demanded an answer. He kept pounding Sang-ho, shouting if he wanted more, and repeating the same demand, Kin Yojin's location. Then the scene shifts to Yujin's room. In the end, Doyle got what he wanted. Sang-ho gave him Yujin's address, the Golden Palace, room 4101. Doyle moved at once, went down the hall, reached the door, shot the lock, and opened it. At Hwaran High School, Park Kang-wook stood among around 10 beaten students. He was breathing hard, thinking about his job to draw attention and split up the enemy. He was relieved things hadn't gotten as bad as expected, and no backup had shown up. He even joked to himself that maybe everyone had run off scared of him. Elsewhere, Ba Yo-hwan, the defeated rank 4, burned with anger. He remembered the mysterious swordsman saying his death wouldn't matter to Hwaran. He couldn't stand being treated like he meant nothing when he led the forces, and swore they'd regret losing him. One of Ba Yo-hwan's men reported that he'd gathered all the forces requested. Still, the man was confused about what was going on, what had happened to his leader, and why they were ignoring the non-stop calls from the school asking for backup. Ba Yo-hwan explained that they only move under orders from Sang-ho or leader Ki Yujin, and if they acted against the 12 nations without permission, they'd become nothing. Meanwhile, at Hwaran High School, Park Kang-wook had finished the first part of his mission. He turned to one beaten student and asked if what he'd said earlier was true, warning that if he lied, he'd see his real side. Terrified, the student said it was true. He swore he personally saw Im Sang-hai's group by the sewer entrance near the recycling bins, all wearing protective suits. He said other people saw it too. They just stay quiet about it. Hearing that, Kang-wook figured this had to be the way into the drug factory. The student sarcastically praised his detective work, but Kang-wook brushed it off and told him to lead the way. Then he said he'd go there himself. On the third-floor hall in Hwaran's main building, Park Jinju was tearing through the reinforcements coming up from the second floor. He laughed like a maniac, saying this was all thanks to the brutal training in Jeju, and these punks weren't even good enough to be his warm-up. He even wondered how much stronger the immortal Park Jinju could still become. After dropping the last of them, he stood among the fallen. Then something caught him off guard. Meanwhile, Doyle reached Golden Palace room 4101. Inside were two naked statues, a man and woman holding hands, with a small marble piece beside them carved with Mom and 101. And Doyle realized Ki Yujin really had killed his parents. As he moved through the room, he muttered that the world was full of lunatics. The walls were covered in creepy paintings, including one called The Day My Mother Was Born. He also passed a fish tank with a fish stabbed by a knife inside it. Then he walked to a door and opened it, and Ki Yujin's huge white snake lunged at him. Back at Hwaran, the reason for Jinju's shock became clear. Yujin was standing at the far end of the hall. Jinju stared at him in disbelief. Doyle didn't even flinch. He blocked the snake cleanly and killed it like he'd seen it coming. Doyle stepped into Ki Yujin's apartment, remembering Sang-ho's warning that Ki Yujin was evil itself. Looking at the horrible scene, he muttered, "This bastard." While checking the place, he called the Blackhead branch in Russia. After apologizing to the operator, he made one more request: contact the Korean branch and send both the medical team and the body retrieval team. He told them to send the medics to Golden Palace room 4102. Doyle gave clear directions using a note Yujin had left for Sangha, and said the body retrieval team should wait at Hwaran High School. Back in Hwaran High's hallway, Yujin asked Park Jinju if he'd seen Jo Sangha. Jinju froze at the question. In the next instant, Yujin closed the gap at insane speed and warned that he wouldn't ask again. Then Ki Yujin struck first and shattered Jinju's hands. Jinju screamed in horrible pain, and Yujin asked again, "Have you seen my Sangha?" Far away at the sewer entrance, Park Kang-wook gagged at the smell and wondered if a drug factory could really be hidden in a place like this. He remembered the boy saying Donggu would help and that he should keep his phone on. But as time dragged on, Kang-wook started losing patience. He texted Donggu, asking where he was and if he'd gotten scared and run off. He bragged that he'd already beaten hundreds of Hwaran guys, found the factory on his own, and told him to hurry. At that same time, Donggu was sprinting towards Suman High School's entrance, breathing hard. Kang-wook kept texting, calling him a coward and asking why he was taking so long when he was supposed to be backup. Inside the drug factory, one technician tried to calm another, saying that with leader Ki Yujin and Sangha, Hwaran couldn't lose. He said the reward would be worth it, and suggested they grab a snack before getting back to work. Just then, Kang-wook moved closer to the factory and the workers and was surprised to see people already inside. The two technicians were talking about what they wanted to eat when they suddenly noticed something moving. Im Sang-hyo complained about rats hidden in the sewer tunnel. Park Kang-wook heard him wonder why he kept seeing more of them. Kang-wook was totally drained after burning through his strength in the fight earlier, so he decided not to pick any pointless battles like this. Then two technicians in protective suits walked by. One asked the other, calling him Sang-hyo Haim Nim, if they could have chicken this time. Right away, Kang-wook knew that voice was Im Sang-hyuao, the rank 5 he was after. That confirmed the drug factory really was in this place, and he felt lucky he'd hidden, knowing he had no chance against Hwaeren's rank 5 in his condition. But then Sang-hyuao stopped, said he'd found tonight's snack, and headed straight for Kang-wook's hiding spot. Kang-wook was stunned. They'd found him. Sang-hyuao told his companion that this person would be their meal, meaning Kang-wook. Meanwhile, on Hwaeren High's 3rd floor, Park Jinju faced Yoo-jin. Jinju was shaken. He hadn't even seen the attack. Yoo-jin wondered if Sang-ho wasn't at the school. Jinju stared at the calm figure before him and thought that if Sang-ho were here, none of this would have happened. Fear crept in as he wondered who this man was and whether someone this terrifying really existed in Hwaeren. To him, even the monster BG Chow didn't feel this dangerous. The white-haired man cut into his thoughts with a strange question. "Who am I? Can you see me?" Then he asked, "Do I exist?" Before Jinju could even process it, the mysterious man hit him with inhuman force and shattered his collarbone. Jinju screamed. He couldn't even tell where the hit came from or how Yoo-jin moved like that, almost like something not human. Standing over him, the man coldly said, "You will die." Jinju couldn't believe what he was hearing. Then, oddly enough, Yoo-jin said he could live if he begged him. Jinju refused. Yoo-jin told him life was precious, so he should at least try to keep it. Jinju couldn't make sense of that twisted logic. When he gave no answer, Yoo-jin attacked again and broke his leg with crushing force. Park Jinju dropped to the floor, screaming in agony. Yoo-jin stood over him and repeated that if he begged, maybe he wouldn't kill him. Then he asked coldly why he still wouldn't do it. Through the pain, Jinju realized this bastard truly meant to kill him. Yoo-jin made it clear, beg or die. That was no bluff. It was real. Jinju couldn't understand how someone in Korea could talk about killing so easily. Yoo-jin answered coldly that Jinju was the one who chose this. In despair, Jinju shouted for him to wait and thought it couldn't end here. He still wanted to become the champion, Hercules. At last, he broke and begged for his life. Yoo-jin looked down at him, thinking over whether to spare him. After a brief pause, Yoo-jin made his choice and said no. Jinju was stunned, even after doing what he was told. Yoo-jin said that if he was going to live by begging, he might as well die. Jinju shut his eyes and waited for the end. But before Yoo-jin could crush his head, a sniper's skill struck him from the side. It turned out even Yoo-jin couldn't dodge that hit, but he was to increase his attack speed.